And we're live. Hello, everyone. It's the stream that was promised many times, several times this past week, but it's happening now. Everyone cross your fingers. Only cross one fingers. Yes. So we're here to talk about the Pact and the Hammer of the Waters, as you can see behind me. We're here to talk about the timeline, but really the Pact and the Hammer of the Waters are the two major events that sort of reorganize things for me. So what we're going to have today is a very intensive live stream. It's not going to be Q&A, hang around, take it easy, grab whatever. I've got a script here and I'm going to move through it pretty hard because otherwise it'll be, just be too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop in between the sections to grab any super chats or quick questions that I missed. But we're definitely going to have a major Q&A session afterwards so that we can all discuss the heresies that I'm about to propose. Thank you, Wisdom Minari. And the first super chat is thanking me for not turning Quinn into pork. No, Quinn has important things to do. I can't eat his brains just yet. I have to let him get smarter. It's kind of one of those, you got to let the kids fatten up before you cook them kind of thing. You got to read your fairy tales, guys. In any case, thank you very much. And so, like I said, if you have remarks that you want to throw at me, you absolutely can while I'm going. If I miss the question, then just keep in mind I'll be looking for questions in the section breaks and then again at the end. So, yes, I've done a lot of research here, guys, and I am excited. Catherine Miller. Oh, Catherine Miller, I think I just gave you a new Starry Wisdom nickname just yesterday. Yes, I did. What was it? So thanks everyone for coming out. Again, sorry about the false starts the last few days. I am still in the middle of moving, and you guys see the paypal.me mythical astronomy thing right up there on the screen. If you want to support the program, that is the best way to do it. Super chats always appreciated, but of course YouTube does take a third. They take their portion, and if you want to get it all straight to the mythical astronomy program, which is me, then you can use the paypal.me mythical astronomy address right there. It is right here. And you don't even need a PayPal account. You should be able to just send something in right there. And that is always the best way to do a one-time donation. And of course, you can always sign up for Patreon as well. Now, Catherine, like I said, just signed up. I've got some new Patreon names queued up. But Catherine Miller, since you piped up, let's see. Oh, the Opal Empress. Let's see here. Scroll. This window won't scroll for me. Hammer of the North and Protector of Cats. Thank you very much. All right. So let us jump right into the script here. Thank you for warming it up, fellas. Yeah, click the like button. Make sure you subscribe. All that stuff. So, guys, the motherfucking Andals. Geez, motherfucking. That's not swearing, YouTube. Not swearing yet. No. These Andals, the frigging Andals, if you will. The first thing that we have to understand about trying to sort out the timeline of pre-Andal Westeros, which is basically what we're talking about today, only the things that happened before the Andal invasion, is that we're going off myth and legend related by word of mouth and the occasional runic record. George has quite intentionally written a Song of Ice and Fire history so that pre-Andal Westeros was illiterate, basically an early Bronze Age society. When the Andals came, they started writing things down as they conquered, and so we have a somewhat dramatic line of demarcation between written history and word-of-mouth history. Additionally, everything they wrote down was heavily shaped by the politics of trying to conquer and assimilate a foreign land, and so we've always got to bear that in mind as well. It's something like trying to suss out what the state of the American continents were before the Europeans arrived. Many native peoples had limited writing, relying instead on oral tradition, and those that did, like the Mayans, for example, had most of their scrolls and carvings burned and erased. Disease, war, and genocide erased even more. And we're only now beginning to realize just how populous and developed the Americas actually were pre-Columbus. And I highly recommend the award-winning book 1491, guys, if you're at all interested in that line of research. One of the best books I've ever read, 1491. It's really terrific. But point is, when an entire continent is conquered by a foreign people, much history is lost and replaced with the infamous fog of history instead. Thank you, Kraken Tacos. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm rolling without My number one mod, Elisa Patience. She's at work today, and it's also her mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Elisa's mom. So yes, Kraken Tacos, Tracy, Chow Chow Chow, AJ. I see you. Yeah, you've got the 1491. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all you mods, and of course, all you well-behaved folks that require very little modding. There we go. So, Fog of History, guys, we can express this in musical form. Yes, we can. If you're lost, you can look at Andal history. Time after time, they will lie. We will catch them. We'll be waiting. Time after time, history's lost. You can look, but there's no writing. Time after time, long night falls. We can guess when it's spitballing. Time after time. There you go. I can't do the music because then I'll get a copyright infringement, but there you go. I do love a little Sydney Lauper. Moon Meteors, Crimson Templar says. And by the way, I've got both my chats up today, so I should be catching all the super chats. They will be lit up in color for me. All right, the 80s, a great decade for music. In any case, one of my favorite examples of Andal bias on Westerosi history is actually the term First Men. It's not a name like Egyptians or Pentashi. There's no First Manlandia or First Manos. The term First Men is basically descriptive. I think it's literally what the Andals called everyone living in Westeros already when they arrived, and nothing more. This doesn't seem like something that people of Westeros would call themselves, and there's ample reason to believe that there were in fact different kinds of people that got lumped together by the Andals as First Men. Think about it. Westeros is supposed to be approximately the size of Europe, and the people from the various parts of Westeros do indeed show different physical characteristics. Maybe not to quite the extent of the various corners of Europe, but the Lannisters have their look, and so do the men from the north, the Stormlands, or the Reach. Phoenix, I'm not going to leave you wanting more today. I've got about a 15,000-word script and room for questions, so yes, thank you, mods. I appreciate it. All right, and thanks for all the nice comments, guys. I see a lot of encouragement coming through. So I appreciate that, guys. And a little bit of healthy teasing. That's fine. Anytime I sing, that's fair game. So think about it, guys. Like I said, Westeros is pretty big. There's people with different physical characteristics. And additionally, there's very strong evidence that the ancestors of course, House Dane and House Hightower descend from the Great Empire of the Dawn, a fabled empire from the further east, which existed before the Long Night, and has ties to Ashai and dragons and the origins of Valyria. The Lannisters, Land the Clever at least, may also come from the Great Empire of the Dawn. That's a tinfoil theory we got to talk about one time. Though the evidence is more sketchy. And then we have the Iron Islanders, who have many clues about a non-Westerosi origin, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. We also have the issue of religion to consider, because the religious diversity of pre-Andal Westeros is more evidence that not all First Men were the same. The First Men worshipped trees, at least after the pact with the Children of the Forest, but what about before that? There are some weird aquatic religions on both coasts of Westeros. There's whatever was involved in the cult of Garth the Green, and some wildlings even worship the others. And who knows how many other religions may have died out when the conversion to the old gods' worship happened. Finally, the oldest tales of migration of the First Men to Westeros have them trekking over land from some undetermined point in Essos, perhaps as far as the fabled Silver Sea, which once existed where the Dothraki Grass Sea is now. This migration seems much less a one-time exodus, like the biblical story of the Israelites fleeing Egypt, and much more the gradual dispersal of people over centuries. So plenty of intermarriage and warfare would have happened along the way. Ergo, there would have been plenty of exchange of genetics and culture, and the first men who began trickling into Westeros over the land bridge between Dorne and Essos would almost certainly not have been culturally and racially homogenous. Thank you. Let's see. Hey, Pat Riley, thanks for dropping through. Yes, we do have a nascent LML Discord, which I don't understand yet, but we're going to make use of here in the near future. So if you want to get an early jump on that, check out the link that Pat Riley just dropped in the chat. All right. So, in other words, lumping together of all, in other words, the lumping together of all the peoples of pre-Andal Westeros into the conglomerate term First Men is highly reflective of the way that we have to view pre-Andal history as overly summarized, heavily truncated, and written with Andal bias, and also as a Sydney Lauper song. Okay, well, anyways, it's too much to say it's all up for grabs, but when we're talking about sorting out events that are thought to have taken place some 5,000 to 10,000 years ago during the Dawn Age and the Age of Heroes, we shouldn't view the consensus timeline the Maesters have arrived at as being very solid. You hear that, Tony Teflon? Shout out to Tony Teflon, who put out a new video today about what caused Robert's Rebellion. So go ahead and check that out on the Tony Teflon YouTube channel. Ages ago, we had a panel on the timeline, and me and Tony were arguing a little bit about how reliable the consensus timeline is. So yeah, shout out to Tony. In any case, the Maesters themselves question the timeline. So check this out. The others, Sam licked his lips, they are mentioned in the annals, though not as often as I would have thought. The annals I've found and looked at, that is. There's more I haven't found, I know. Some of the older books are falling to pieces. The pages crumble when I try to turn them. And the really old books, either they have crumbled all the way or they're buried somewhere that I haven't looked yet. Or, well, it could be that there are no such books and never were. The oldest histories we have written, were written after the Andals came to Westeros. The First Men only left us runes on rock. So everything we think we know about the Age of Heroes and the Dawn Age and the Long Night comes from accounts set down by Septons thousands of years later. There are archmaesters at the Citadel who question all of it. Those old histories are full of kings who reigned for hundreds of years and knights writing around 1,000 years before there were knights. You know the tales, Brandon the Builder, Simeon Star Eyes, Knights King. We say that you're the 998th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but the oldest list I've found shows 674 commanders, which suggests that it was written during the long ago. John broke in. Oh, a couple super chats rolling through. Thank you, Jessica. Hi, and you're welcome. Shut up and take my money. Yes, we can do that. How am I doing? I'm doing great. I was mostly stressed out because I didn't have internet and couldn't present all this wonderful material that I had ready. I've got a video too, guys, by the way. I'm going to put out a video probably tomorrow morning. I was going to put it out this morning, but I decided to hold it, one video a day. So tomorrow I'm going to have the Azor High as a bad guy video, which is actually going to tell us a little bit more about why Jon is not going to stab Daenerys at the end of the books. Very encouraging thought for everyone. So, all right. So Jon breaks in, cuts Sam off, and this is one of the worst break-ins in the series. Let Sam finish, man. It was just getting good. Anyway, this quote gives us a good framework for interpreting the consensus history. It was laid down by the Andals centuries and millennia after it happened, in the case of these Dawn Age events, and it's very questionable. The arrival of the Andals itself is somewhat up for debate because they began writing things down. The arrival of the Andals itself is somewhat up for debate, but because they began writing things down, and because the historical events they recorded can then be cross-referenced against records from the Iron Islands, Riverlands, the Reach, and elsewhere, it can be set within a range of sorts. It seems the earliest possible date for the Andal invasion is about 4,500 years ago, and more likely it seems like it was closer to 2,500 years. There's a really good scholarly paper out there that was written about this, and I have not been able to find it. I think it was a Westeros.org thing, but that's what I'm referring to there. So, guys, this is an entirely different line of research. And I know you Andal truthers are out there, but look, there's really no narrative reason or payoff for the Andals to have been in Westeros during the Long Night. And the evidence that people hold up for this regarding iron is misconstrued, in my opinion. So let me just deal with this idea real quick, guys. This is the Andal early invasion. And basically, this is, I think, written by people who don't understand the Great Empire of the Dawn was here. And they're looking for some sort of reason for advanced stuff to be in ancient Westeros. And they think it was the Andals. It wasn't the Andals. Yes, but so perfect. Bethany Stevens, what are my thoughts on the Andals came before and caused the Long Night theory? So I've got about 5 minutes on that theory coming at you right now. So thank you very much. Oh, and Emarty enjoyed the 5-hour live stream. Thank you. I had a ton of fun. Got going on that one. I was really feeling it that day. In any case, so this is an entirely different line of research. Like I said, And we know those Andal truthers are out there. But like I said, I don't think there's a reason for them to have been there. And we got to talk about iron here. So Bronze Age, pre-Andal Westeros, just like the Bronze Age cultures in the real world, did have the capability to make crude iron long before they could make steel. These are very different things. Crude iron is inferior to bronze for making weapons. So during the Bronze Age on Earth, we see crude iron alongside bronze, but it doesn't replace bronze as a weapon until the iron gets so advanced that it's almost steel, or it's at least very, refined iron. There's a lot of degrees of iron, but crude iron is totally different, much easier to make. You don't need a forge that can go 3,000 degrees and all that stuff. So we see crude iron ceremonial swords in the Winterfell crypts. And we don't know how far those go back, but the oldest ones have red stains on their laps, which is just the rust marks from the iron. So it seems like the iron swords have been being put in the crypts forever. There's plenty of iron on the Iron Islands, which was, they discovered that seemingly long before the Andals came. And so most likely this crude iron would have been used for things like horseshoes and other very basic objects, farming equipment, stuff like that, just like the Bronze Age in the real world. Now, what the Andals brought was steel, which is, you could think of it as very highly refined iron. You also have to add carbon and a couple of things to make steel. But point is, to make steel, you do need a very advanced kind of forge. It needs to be able to go up to 3,000 degrees or more. There's a process to it, bloody, bloody, bloody. So that's what the Andals brought. And that steel was much better than the bronze weapons and armor that the first men had. So the Andals had a huge, weaponry advantage there. So the presence of a little bit of crude iron in ancient Westeros does not mean the Andals were there. That's the first point I want to make. Thank you, Serena, for your super chat. Here you are. Ooh, cool elf icon. In any case, so the narrative logic, guys, always comes first with these theories. And putting the Andals in Westeros at the time of the Long Night, this kind of strikes me as pointless. The few things that we find in ancient Westeros which seem too advanced for the first men, such as the sword Dawn, the last hero's dragon steel sword, the Fewstone fortress at Old Town, Moat Cailin, Castle Pike, the Wall, a few other things, are, in my opinion, better attributed to the great empire of the Dawn, or in a few cases, some sort of vanished race of deep ones. None of it points to the Andals, who do not make fused stone or magic swords. They do not set spells into the walls of their fortresses, such as we see at Storm's End in the Wall, and they do not build an oily black stone or megalithic stone of any kind. The theory that the Andals were in Westeros during the Long Night also requires an implausibly giant conspiracy by all of the Andal record keepers to obscure both the Long Night and the Andal conquest of Westeros. And that's actually the opposite of what we see. The Andals are quite proud of their conquest and wrote down every detail of it. Some of it was mythicized. We don't know if there's actually 7 battles, at the one in the Vale. I forget the name of the battle, but there was a huge battle of 7 stars, I believe it was, in the Vale. Some of those numbers might be slightly changed to honor the 7 and stuff. But for the most part, the Andals kept very good records of their conquest. And then these details can then be matched against, like I said, the word of mouth and runic records of the various Westerosi first man houses that the Andals interacted with. And the result is actually a pretty good historical record of the Andal conquest, which sounds nothing like the fantastical tales of the Long Night and the Dawn Age and things like that. So in other words, I think it's a very safe and solid conclusion to say that there seems to have been a significant chunk of time between the Long Night and the arrival of the Andals, just like Sam said in that quote. If the Andals had been in Westeros for the Long Night and the invasion of the others, then it would have been written down as fact by first-hand witnesses, just like all of the other Andal observed history is, or by people living in the immediate aftermath, at least. But instead, the Andals regard all the specific events and people of the Long Night as fable, because that's how they heard about things like the others and the last hero, as fable. If the ancestors of the Andals back in Essos witnessed the Long Night, which they probably did, then they would have only seen a long winter and not the others, because there's no tales of the others in Essos until we get all the way over to the Great Empire of the Dawn, and then we have the demons of the Line of Night. But in the main portion of Essos, there's no stories about the others. So the Andals don't believe in the others for the most part, because they're outside their historical record. And that's basically the point of this first section. When the Andals arrived in Westeros, they slapped the label First Men on all the primitives that live there, and the label myth and fable on pretty much all of their word of mouth and runic records. The history that comes after that is fairly reliable, but what the current historians of the Citadel have to say about anything before that range, but what the current historians of the Citadel have to say about anything before that ranges from educated guesswork to very biased revisionist history. And all of the events we want to concern ourselves today fall before this line of reliable history. And that gives me plenty of room to spew my headcanon at you. All right. The PayPal link is actually right, it should be right up on the screen here, but I should drop it. You know where I should drop it is like in the description of the video. And you know what else I can do is I can actually publish this essay in case any of you guys want to read along with me. I know that some of you guys like to do that. So that's what I'll do. I will publish this real quick. If anybody wants to fire a question up real quick, I can try to grab that too. We are at a section break. So is everyone convinced? Have I knocked down the Andal theory? Oh, okay, so when the super chat is okay, right there you go. All right. And of course, guys, this is all, don't take anything I say too seriously. Like, it's all theoretical. You know, maybe I'm wrong about all this stuff, but I'm just making my best case. You know how it is. I don't cast scorn on anybody for believing in theories that I don't agree with, except for the spaceship theory. If you're trying to take away the comet and say it's a spaceship, then I'm going to get a little upset, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm just publishing this now. I'm going to add the link to the description of this video, and I will drop it in the chat as well, so you guys can read along. Do you think the Starks laid iron swords across their dead if they weren't using iron for weapon? Or why do you think? Because I think that iron is a ceremonial thing, and Old Nan mentions that it's thought that the others hate the touch of iron and fire. That's a very old, like, folkloric idea, is that iron is can sometimes hurt some types of spirits and things like that. So I think George just sort of borrowed that idea. And so the idea, the swords are supposed to keep the vengeful spirits in the tombs. So there's obviously, people believe that there's a little bit of a magical quality to the swords, or to iron itself. And so that's why they would use iron. Even if it wasn't good enough to make an actual good sword, these are ceremonial swords in the crypt. So, all right, so let me just get this link for you guys. And I'll drop it in the chat, and then I'll add it to the description. So there is the link of this published essay. Thank you. Oh, we got a couple of super chats. You guys are so nice today. Thank you. Freya Jade. Hey, Freya. Thanks for dropping in. Thanks you so much for all of your amazing content. Well, you're quite welcome. From New Zealand. All right. And that question that I was just answering comes from CJ. Thank you, CJ. And okay, so now I need to go to this one here. Edit the video. I think you guys are really going to like the Azor Ahai video that I have coming. It's about 20 minutes, and I've talked about all this stuff before, but I'm sort of gathering it together and making my best case for the idea that Azor Ahai is in fact a bad guy, and what that means for the story, and the idea of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa as expressing two different heroic ideals that we see different characters gravitating towards. So I'm very excited about it. It's not Jojen Paste or the Great Empire of the Dawn. It's a little more, philosophy, moralistic kind of view, but it's dealing with some of the main tension with how the show ended as far as Daenerys goes, and why we should have hope that it's going to be different in the books. I always love coming back to that topic. So, and let me also put the PayPal.me address in here. Perfect. Okay. So guys, if you hit refresh on the stream, in the description will be both the PayPal link and the link to the text that I'm reading from. All right, now with that said, please slap the like button. Yes, sir. Will the runic knowledge of the first men be translated by an Odin figure? I would love the idea of some runes of the first men getting uncovered and translated. It would have to be someone like Mance Raider or Cold Hands or Blood Raven or Bran post Weirwoodnet download or something. But yeah, somebody might be able to translate some runes. That would be awesome. Oh, Jennifer Wood. Yes, there's another new patron whose name I bestowed last night. Emerald Jenny the Unkillable, Long Strider of the Lilywood. I'm glad you like it, Jenny. Jennifer has some amazing war stories. She is indeed unkillable. She survived 9/11 and a few other things. So nice. Gotta love that. Gotta love the fighting spirit. All right. So, like I said, back to the script. Oh, another one. E. Marty asking me to compare other killing weapons: iron steel, dragon glass, Valyrian steel, dragon glass. So basically, I think Valyrian steel and dragon glass are more or less should be looked at the same as far as the symbolism goes. Like they're both black ice and black fire weapons. There's a whole line of black fire symbolism. I would recommend the Bloodstone Compendium number 1 and 2 for all of that stuff. I went way deep. Basically, anytime you see a black weapon, it's in the same family of symbolism. So you have dragon glass, Valyrian steel, and just regular old black iron. All have this idea that they kill the others. I don't think iron will actually do it, though. It actually would probably have to be, Valyrian steel or dragon glass. But in the new Azor Ahai video that's coming out tomorrow, I mentioned that not only should Jon be able to light his sword on fire like Beric does if he's resurrected by Melisandre, he should also be able to do that with dragon glass. I'm trying to get centered here so this pleases my eye here. I got it. Oh, no, maybe this way. There we go. Okay. No. There it is. Okay. Sorry, guys. Long Strider of the Lilywood. Yes, long may she reign. Oh, we've got a round tower question. Yes, so Bethany, I'm going to get into the round towers a little bit later. I suspect that is Great Empire of the Dawn tech. Absolutely. Either that or it's just a matter of the first men being more advanced before the long night and then losing certain amounts of technology. But whatever they knew before the long night quite likely came from the Great Empire of the Dawn. So I like the way you're thinking there. Thank you, Janeway. And thanks to everyone who donated via Super Chat, or via PayPal, rather. PayPal right here. During the 5-hour live stream. I didn't get notifications during, but when I went afterwards, I found all these little love gifts from you guys, and it really meant a lot. So appreciate that. Let me grab a vitamin water break here. So really, that was just the prelude. We got the Andal stuff out of the way. Now we're ready to talk about the Long Night bottleneck. The next thing that we want to realize about the timeline is that the Long Night itself is actually... Oh, let me scroll back. Sorry. The Long Night itself is actually the only firm line of demarcation in the Westerosi history that comes before the Andal invasion. The Long Night was a global or semi-global event witnessed from Westeros to Asshai, so we know for a fact that it happened. Even the Maesters accept this. We can also deduce that it would have acted as a gigantic cultural and genetic bottleneck if it lasted anything longer than a couple of years, because any sort of worldwide darkness would quickly lead to famine, and thus to lawlessness, chaos, and anarchy. And not the good kind of theoretical anarchy where everyone sort of polices themselves. Shout out to the Seattle Autonomous Zone, the Chaz, whatever that is. So we're talking about a bare knuckles fight over the last helpings of meat and vegetables available. And yes, I'm sure there was plenty of cannibalism, folks. Shout out to my Jojen Paste video. If you haven't watched that, Weirwood Paste is people. Make sure you check that out. So the Westerosi tales say that the Long Night lasted a generation, while Colloquo Votar reports on the legend of the Long Night from Yi Ti, which says it lasted a lifetime. Descendants of the Rhoynar have, quote, tales of a darkness that made the Rhoyne dwindle and disappear, her waters frozen as far south as the joining of the Selhoru, which is a level of severity that speaks to a semi-permanent winter. The Rhoyne is the biggest river we've seen anywhere in this world. So to freeze a large portion of it would require a long night that lasted more than a few weeks. More likely it was measured in years. And actually, one second. I think I have a bottle of water here. Where did I put that? I'm going to churn through this. Hang on one second, guys. One thing I did learn on the 5-hour live stream is that when you're sitting down in front of the camera and you get up to get something, you have to mute the camera, or else you end up giving a giant crotch shot to the entire stream, which I did last week several times. Sorry about that. In any case, got that part under control now. So sometimes I actually drink water, which I've heard is good for you, instead of sugar water. So here's what this means, guys. The Long Night would have been years of unbelievable starvation, war, and mass death. And oh, look, super chats. You guys. George Tidwell, don't have time to stick around to watch live, but wanted to show some support. Thanks, George. It'll be there for you on the replay, my friend. So hello from the past, George. Gabe's logic. Giant spiders seem unfitting for Arctic creatures. Perhaps it wasn't always so cold, and a great event froze the north, created the magical seasons, and brought about the others. Also, how much tinfoil is too much for a hat? The more foil you have, the wider the brim can be. You can make a sombrero if you have enough tinfoil. So there is no too much. I believe that George chose ice spiders because it's also a metaphor. If you remember the frozen weirwood tree that Bran saw, the Night King tree, when he was in his vision, it was all frozen and weighed down. And when a tree's branches are weighed down by snow, they curl back down to the ground, and it looks like a big spider. And so the idea of the others riding ice spiders, it's really just actually hinting at the others using the weirwood net, but like a frozen version of the weirwood net. There probably are also actual ice spiders, but he always chooses things that he can use as symbols, you know. So I need to make that video. Actually, that's a really cool tiny little theory that people always want to hear more about. In any case, so the Long Night, like I said, it's going to be starvation, death, you know, war, anarchy. Everyone's starving. The point is that this would have been the total collapse of any institutions or power structures that existed at that time, because nobody can maintain power over a population of human beings when there's no food. Nobody cares about libraries or the crown jewels or anybody's house name when everyone is starving, you know? It's every man for himself. And the simple fact is that a long night lasting more than a couple of years is an event that would have shrunk the world's population down to a very small number, as happened in the real world in 70,000 BCE, when Mount Toba erupted and blew 650,000 miles of vaporized rock into the air, dimming the sun for at least 6 years. Human population dipped down to less than 1,000 males of breeding age, and perhaps as low as 40. This is a giant bottleneck of humanity that the anthropologists and researchers have found. So ergo, we don't have to pin down the exact length of the long night to understand that it was a huge cultural and genetic bottleneck through which a lot of things did not pass. Much of mankind's memory up to that point would have been wiped clean. Whole clans or tribes of people would have been wiped out, and many or most of the cultural traditions would have changed or disappeared altogether. In other words, if we have to take everything before the arrival of the Andals with a grain of salt, then we have to take everything said to occur before the long night with an entire Lot's wife-sized pillar of salt. It's not all bad, though. Knowing that the long night existed and that it would have killed almost everyone living at the time actually helps us to place certain events as likely to have happened either before or after it. And it's for this reason that we'll start from the long night and work outward in both directions to establish a likely timeline for the major events which seem to have some basis in fact. Most legends do have some basis in fact, actually, because ancient man memorialized important events like floods and comets and things like that through myth and legend. It's just a matter of sorting out the metaphor and symbol from the historical memory. And that is section number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and change my background. I've got some new green screens for you. You're going to like this one. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Meteor Man, that's me. All right, so now I'd like to propose my first major reorganization of the timeline. And this is really the reorganization. The Age of Heroes refers to the events that took place right after the long night, according to me, while the Dawn Age refers to the events before the long night. Along the same lines, the Pact between humans and the children of the forest, which supposedly divides the Dawn Age from the Age of Heroes, also occurred at the time of the long night, not thousands of years before, as is commonly believed. So in other words, I think the Pact does separate the Dawn Age and the Age of Heroes, but I think the Pact and that separation comes right at the time of the long night, not before. So it goes Dawn Age, then the long night in the Pact, and then the Age of Heroes right afterward. That is what I'm proposing. So there are many reasons to think this, starting with the simple logic of the long night bottleneck, which dictates that the vast majority of the many great houses which claim to have existed since the Age of Heroes could only have been established after the long night and not before. There's just no way that so many powerful families could have survived through the anarchy and death of the long night, let alone held on to their seats of power and their authority to rule. It makes far more sense that we would have had a bunch of new centers of authority establishing themselves in the aftermath of the long night, as humanity began to pick itself up off the mat and rebuild. A few of those new authorities may have been peoples who survived through the long night, retained their cultural identity and ancestral lands, and returned to them and set up their power base again. But that would have been the exception. Most of these new centers of power would have been heroes of the long night, groups of strangers that somehow banded together to survive the long night in little pockets. And again, this is what happened on Earth after Toba. It's also what happened in the East after the great empire of the Dawn collapsed during the long night. And the quote there from the World of Ice and Fire says, "Yet the great empire of the Dawn was not reborn, for the restored world was a broken place where every tribe of man went its own way, fearful of all the others." And that's more or less what I'm proposing for the rest of the world. Established power structures were toppled, and the scattered survivors created new cultures and societies. I see people filing in here for the timeline discussion. I will just say again that if you want to read the script along with what I am talking about, the link is in the description. And if you don't see it there, just refresh your window. And if you would like to donate, you can obviously do that with a super chat. But if you want to make sure I get all of the money, not 70% of the money, because YouTube does take 30%, then you can use the paypal.me mythical astronomy. I also get that money right away instead of having to wait for a month, which would be really helpful right now because we're in the middle of moving and times are tight. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In any case, so this is what I'm proposing. Like I said, structures are toppled, the survivors scattered, they create new cultures and societies. And here, by the way, is probably the answer to the big question of why did the first men adopt the religion of the children of the forest wholesale when they had been enemies before that? Nearly every First Man house apparently adopted old gods worship and maintained it until the Andals came, which is for centuries and millennia. And in the North, they still practice it to this day. So it's a total conversion to the old gods' religion by the First Men. Now, the Long Night provides just the sort of circumstance for this to happen. The existing population of Westeros is whittled down to a fraction, with the survivors desperate and traumatized and perhaps thinking of themselves as abandoned or cursed by their former gods. The Westerosi tales of the last hero and the Night's Watch winning the war for the dawn to end the long night speak of the children of the forest coming to the aid of humanity. And that's the other piece of the puzzle here. This is the reason why the survivors of the long night would have been so grateful and impressed with the children of the forest that they would adopt their religion. If the weirwood nature magic rather of the green seers was the thing that saved humanity's bacon during the long night, then you can see why they would have taken up enthusiastic worship of the weirwood trees and the power behind them. Thank you, Dan. I will indeed keep up the good work, or whatever quality of work this is. So in my opinion, placing the pact between men and the children of the forest at the time of the long night makes everything else make a lot more sense. The mysterious switch of religion is explained. The very basic question of why the First Men would make a pact at all with a foe they were largely defeating and driving back is also explained. That's perplexed the fandom for years, but I think the answer is right here. They stopped warring on the children of the forest because the long night wiped out most of humanity, and then the survivors made peace with the children because they only survived with the help of the children. More evidence comes from thinking about the origins of the Night's Watch. Most of Westeros now worships the Andal faith of the Seven, and so most Night's Watch recruits say their vows in the Sept these days. But we see in a Game of Thrones that Night's Watch recruits who come from houses that still worship the old gods may choose to swear their vows in front of a heart tree, as Jon Snow does. But think about it. Before the Andals came to Westeros, almost every Night's Watch recruit would have been a worshiper of the old gods, and thus would have sworn their oaths to protect the realm and never leave their post, etc., to the weirwood trees, to the green seers, in other words. Let me say that again. Before the Andals came, almost every Night's Watch recruit, and certainly the original Night's Watch recruits, swore their vows to the green seers. That makes sense, because the children of the forest helped establish the Night's Watch. This is from the World of Ice and Fire concerning the last hero. Alone, he finally reached the children despite the efforts of the White Walkers, and all the tales agree this was a turning point. Thanks to the children, the first men of the Night's Watch banded together and were able to fight and win the Battle for the Dawn, the last battle that broke the endless winter and sent the others fleeing to the icy north. So, the children helped the last hero, and we also know the children of the forest once had a custom of providing dragon glass to the Night's Watch as well. So this is all adding up. The children of the forest helped mankind defeat the others. That's very clear. And the children helped man set up a new institution, the First Men of the Night's Watch, which involved mankind swearing a bunch of stuff to the green seers in return. These vows might as well say, "Thanks a ton for showing us how to defeat the others, O green seers. And we swear upon our graves that we will maintain the practices you have shown, so that we will always be ready when they come again." Something like that, right? Gosh, that sounds kind of like a pact, doesn't it? The children help man, man swears a bunch of stuff to the children in return, and a common goal is achieved. Doesn't it make sense that this is the same pact where man swore to stop fighting the children and instead take up their religion, or at least a similar pact made around the same time and for the same basic reasons? I think it makes sense. That's why I made this video. And I feel like switching sunglasses. So there you go. So if this is the case, then the Age of Heroes, which is supposed to follow the pact, does indeed come right after the Long Night. And the Age of Heroes is basically a collection of origin stories for most of the first great houses of Westeros. This is exactly what you'd expect to find after a cultural reset button the size and severity of the Long Night. So the collection of stories the Maesters group into the Dawn Age, then, essentially represents the time before the long night, which is why everything we hear about that time sounds extremely fantastical and fairy tale-like. These are the very hazy memories that a few of the survivors of the long night carried with them through the darkness and then told to their children and grandchildren. And these tales would quickly take on the air of legend because the post-long night world would have been so different. But the new history being created by the new First Men houses, the heroes of the Age of Heroes, would be carried on through direct transmission right up to the time of the Andals with at least some amount of clarity, since so many of these houses seem to have maintained power in a continuous fashion for centuries leading up to the arrival of the Andals. That's exactly what we find in the historical record. Many of the First Men houses kept records of their ruling monarchs, which the Andal historians treated as somewhat historical, as opposed to primarily mythical. All right, so section break time, guys. How are you enjoying this? Am I selling you here? Are we buying my logic here? This is basically logic. This is not. We are going to do a little bit of symbolism today, but all right. So yeah, I do think it's significant that Jon and Sam said their vows to the Weirwood trees. Essentially, I think that's this is one of the significant things, is that George is showing us the origins of the Night's Watch. It would have been swearing vows to the Green Seers. So, and yeah, Chow AJ, it's not, I mean, even so, whenever the pact between children and men happened, there was still then conflict between the children and men after that. That's true no matter when it happened. There's not a hard line. But what we do see is the First Men taking up the religion, and all the castles in Westeros built by the First Men are built around a godswood, which shows you that they were already worshiping the old gods when they, built their castles. So this is why I'm saying the Age of Heroes should come after this conversion of religion, which again I think is explained by the Long Night. So, all right. So now we've got if somebody was timed out accidentally, apologies. That'll come back in like 5 minutes. So just chill. Sorry about that. You can find clues about this proposed alternate timeline of mine in the origin myths of many of the great houses, specifically in the fact that so many of them seem to have natural disasters, which sound like they could be references to the Long Night built into the beginning of the story, and then trace the expansion of their line to the time that comes afterward. Although the main Westerosi Long Night story says nothing about what could have caused the sun to disappear, most of you watching will know that I believe the answer to that riddle is spelled out in 3 Eastern myths. Once we have that fuller picture of the compound disaster that was remembered as the Long Night, we can then see that there is actually references to the Long Night in the origin stories of most of the great houses, because that's when all of the great houses sprang up after the Long Night. The Long Night, or some mythicized version of it, will often be the oldest thing that anyone remembers. So those 3 myths. Oh, we got a Stephiz sighting. Hey, Stephiz. I'm waiting for your super chat to come up so I can put it up on the screen. Thanks, Stephiz. So these 3 myths are the Azor Ahai Forging of Lightbringer myth, which is from Ashai, the Second Moon Origin of Dragon myth, which is from Karth, and the Bloodstone Emperor Long Night myth, which was recorded by Yiddish scribes and comes from the Far East. The Azor Ahai myth and the Karthian myth speak of a moon cracking. It happens when Lightbringer is forged in the first story, and in the second, there's a once-existent second moon, which wanders too close to the sun and cracks open to give birth to fiery dragons. So the products of these 2 moon-cracking myths, flaming sword and fire-breathing dragons, are, of course, both classical mythical symbols for comets and meteors. And the 3rd Long Night myth straight up tells us about a meteor falling at the time of the Long Night. The last legend is, of course, the Bloodstone Emperor myth, and it's implied that the Bloodstone Emperor actually draws magical power from this black meteorite, which he worshipped. In other words, the Long Night was caused by a probably magical moon meteor impact, and more likely a series of probably magical moon meteor impacts, which threw up enough ash, smoke, and debris, and again, think thousands of cubic miles of vaporized rock, dirt, and plants, to blot out the sun and caused a prolonged darkness. In addition to that, the moon meteor impacts could or would have set off raging wildfires, earthquakes, and most of all, floods, if any of them landed in the water or near the water. We'll find references to all of these things scattered throughout the Westerosi origin stories, and we'll also see that Prometheus-like Azor Ahai component of mankind obtaining the fire of the gods in many or most of these myths as well. I won't focus on that angle today, but I will sort of just point it out as a corroboration that these myths are all speaking of the same related set of events. Now, the 3 Eastern myths I just named set the template. Moons are cracked. Meteors, or symbols of meteors, are born and fall to the earth. Darkness ensues, and some sort of wizard or king gains power. Azor Ahai gains Lightbringer, the Bloodstone Emperor gains the magical meteor and many dark sorceress powers, and the Carthian tale simply speaks of the moment that dragons came to the earth breathing fire, which, of course, dragons are themselves a great magical power harnessed by the Valyrians and the Targaryens, and, according to me, the Great Empire of the Dawn. All right, so yes, I did. I said the thing. Moon meteors, drink. Put the emojis in there. All that stuff. So, moon meteors. I have to say, I think this might be my favorite backdrop of all the backdrops that I've tried so far. This is a pretty good one. I feel like my thoughts are meteors emanating out in all directions, and that's pretty much my state of mind. So, guys, it's hammer time. Break it down. Break down the Arm of Dorn. Because the most conspicuous Westerosi match to these myths might be the Hammer of the Waters legend. The unbelievable destruction recorded in this legend was supposedly the work of the Children of the Forest, although I have my doubts, as you'll see. The following is the masterly recounting of Westerosi fable in the World of Ice and Fire, and it begins by talking about how the first men were winning the war against the children, saying, "Finally, driven by desperation, the little people turned to sorcery and beseeched their green seers to stem the tide of these invaders. And so they did, gathering in their hundreds, some say on the Isle of Faces, and calling on their old gods with song and prayer and grisly sacrifice. 1,000 captive men were fed to the weirwood," one version of the tale goes, whilst another claims the children used the blood of their own young. "And the old gods stirred, and giants awoke in the earth, and all of Westeros shook and trembled. Great cracks appeared in the earth, and hills and mountains collapsed and were swallowed up. And then the seas came rushing in, and the Arm of Dorn was broken and shattered by the force of the water, until only a few bare rocky islands remained above the waves. The summer sea joined the narrow sea, and the bridge between Essos and Westeros vanished for all time." Or so the legend says. So the legend says that something hammered the land bridge and it collapsed, causing huge floods. Now, usually a hammer falls and strikes, so that's kind of an odd name for an earthquake, which rises up from underground. Giants waking in the earth sounds like an earthquake for sure, but a hammer, that's something that falls from the sky. And of course, there's actually a book called Lucifer's Hammer, which is a fantasy story, and it involves a comet. And that's what the term Lucifer's Hammer refers to. Good stuff. So this is a great description of a meteor strike, a hammer. And meteors can, in fact, cause the sort of massive land collapse, such as is described in the Hammer of the Waters story. As the Maesters go on to point out, it actually doesn't make any sense for the children to have done this to stop the first men from warring on them. Thousands of first men had already been crossing the land bridge for centuries, and stopping more from coming wasn't helping the children win the war they were already losing against the first men that were already there. It's very much a closing the barn door after the horses have escaped situation, which, spoiler alert for those of you not raised with horses and barns, closing the barn door after the horses have escaped doesn't do a whole lot of good. They're gone already. Additionally, do the children really have the power to cause earthquakes? If so, they sure used it in a weird way. The titanic scale of the Hammer of the Waters event supposedly required a massive blood sacrifice, but wasn't very effective, as I pointed out. Why not try a much smaller hammer on a couple of those first man ring forts or primitive castles? That would have sent the first men running, I would think. Presumably, the smaller scale of the hammer then would also require less blood sacrifice. So try to picture it. Your first man sentry, looking over the moss-bearded crenellations of your ring fort, peering into the dark primal forest for any sign of the creepy little elves you've been warring against. You see a group of them at the edge of the woods, slitting the throats of a few captives, and then suddenly the ground begins to shake. There. Rents open up in the earth, and a few of your best drinking buddies fall in. Your fort collapses, and the elves never even came within bowshot. How discouraging would that be? How are you supposed to fight against that? You couldn't. You would just run the other way, I would think. So in other words, the children had any sort of make the ground shake magic. They'd have used it much differently, and they should have been able to use it to defeat the first men long before resorting to destroying an entire landmass. I mean, I think we're being invited to question the official story here, and then to realize that the Hammer of the Waters sounds like a perfect mythical memory of a moon meteor impact event. All right, thanks for the encouraging messages coming in, guys. I'm seeing some of these. Thank you. So, whether or not the children used the hammer, whether or not the children caused the hammer to fall, the idea that it required blood magic, murder, to initiate, well, that matches the story template of the myths that we're comparing to. Both the Azor Ahai fable and the Bloodstone Emperor fable speak of a blood magic murder. Azor Ahai murders Nissa Nissa, which cracks the moon. The Bloodstone Emperor murders the Amethyst Empress, which causes the sun to hide its face because it was just such an evil thing to do. And compare that to the Hammer legend, where we have this hammer being called down by mass blood sacrifice on the Isle of Faces. Only death can pay for moon meteors, it seems. So George has left us with a nice literary clue about all this when he decided to name one of the Stepstone's islands, which are now all that remains of the broken arm of Dorne. He named one of them Bloodstone Island. The Bloodstone Emperor supposedly caused the long night by calling down a meteor, a bleeding star, or bloody stone, in A Song of Ice and Fire speak. And here where the Hammer of the Waters struck, we have a Bloodstone Island. Like a giant, the Bloodstone Emperor did it sign. That's how I think about it. In more recent history, Bloodstone Island is taken as the royal seat of Daemon Targaryen when he declares himself king of the Narrow Sea. And, symbolism alert, Daemon is a terrific Azor Ahai parallel figure who spends 13 days carving wounds into a heart tree with a Valyrian steel sword before dying in a dragon vs. dragon fight over the God's Eye and Isle of Faces against a Night King analog character, Aemond One Eye. And of course, the Isle of Faces is where the Hammer of the Waters was supposedly called down, but that's just symbolism for another day. So, you know, we'll just keep moving. Will we have an update on TWOW by July 29th, which is when George said we can lock him in prison if it's not done by? Yes, I think George will have to make an announcement by then. All right, so, well, the last hero legend is not from Essos, Crouching Panther, Hidden Dragon. The Long Night legend and the last hero legend are from Westeros, but we also, the Azor Ahai legend is from Essos. And we have actually Long Night legends from around the world. So there is a reason for that. And check out my Great Empire of the Dawn video, specifically the one called Great Empire of the Dawn Westeros. Basically, I think Azor Ahai started in Ashai, came to Westeros, and that's why you have the legend in both places and looking slightly different. So now, if the Hammer of the Waters was a moon meteor event, as I propose, well, that means that it would have fallen at the time of the Long Night, not thousands of years before. And this is also what I'm saying about the Pact, that it happened at the Long Night. Here's the thing. The official story is that the Pact followed soon after the Hammer of the Waters. In fact, that the Hammer drove the first men to sign the Pact. So basically, I'm keeping these two events together, but just moving them both to the time of the Long Night. It makes a lot more sense that way. Dark magic was performed. All the tales agree. Then the meteors fell like hammers and dragons, causing the Long Night. In that darkness came the others, and mankind aligned with the children to stop them, forming a pact in the first night's watch. When the sun rose again, the heroes and survivors of the Long Night established new centers of power that persisted for centuries and millennia, all of which were built around a godswood with a weirwood heart tree to honor their new worship of the old gods. That's my timeline. So compare that to the official story, which quite intentionally makes no sense at several key moments. The official story is that Centuries or millennia before the Long Night, the first men were kicking the children of the forest's ass in a war of conquest, leading the little forest elves to use all of their magical power to destroy the land bridge that the humans had already crossed, which did nothing to stop the humans, who kept kicking ass. But then the humans inexplicably ceased warring on the children and signed a pact with them. And on top of that, the humans decided to toss out all of their old religions and adopt the religion of the elves that they had just been trying to exterminate for no reason that anyone can remember. Right. Okay. So again, none of that makes sense. And it's not supposed to. It's written as a fog of history type puzzle that we're supposed to pull on the threads of. My proposed timeline resolves all of these issues, I think. Why did the children drop the hammer when it was way too late? Well, they didn't. That was a long night causing moon meteor. Why did the first men stop warring on the children? Well, they got hit by a meteor, and then the others. Why did the first men sign the pact and adopt the old god's worship? Because the children helped the first men of the Night's Watch defeat the others, saving humanity. Because the children, and because so much of human culture would have been lost during the long night. Why did the Night's Watch originally swear their vows to the weirwood trees and the green seers? Well, because that's who helped them survive. So it's a delightfully straightforward answer, to be honest. And to me, it just makes a ton of sense. All right, so my proposed timeline so far says the Hammer of the Waters was an account of a meteor impact that happened when the long night fell, that the pact, or pacts plural, between humans and children would have happened shortly after, probably a few years into the long night, that the Night's Watch would have been set up at this time as well, and finally that the Dawn Age refers to everything that came before that, and that the Age of Heroes refers to the era that came right after that, still well before the Andals arrived and started writing things down. All right, section break. How we doing, guys? Having fun? Got about 300 people hanging out with me. Thank you, guys. Hey, everybody click that like button. And let's see here. I'm actually going to... yes. Jason Gonding sent me a moon meteor PayPal. Thank you, Jason. Francesca sent one. Asking also, what were the first men adopting, or what were they worshiping before the children of the forest, before the old gods worship? That's a great question. And I'm going to say that it was probably a lot of Garth the Green worship. It's the Maesters say that the nature god Garth the Green type figure is one of the oldest folkloric characters in their world, as in our world. So I think that's a big one. Anybody near the water apparently worships either like the Squishers or just like the storm god and the sea god. We see that on both coasts, that they worship, the wind and the waves. And basically, people tend to worship the powers that run their life. Like I would guess the first men that were in Dorne, they might have had a sun god that they worshipped, for example, just like half the Egyptian deities are tied to the sun. So we can speculate about that, but there's really not much that's said other than, again, Garth the Green, worship of storm gods and sea gods, and the Squishers, I guess. So. All right, looks like everyone is having fun. I'm having fun. Is it? Oh, it's almost 4:20 East Coast. I've got 16 minutes. Muhammad, will Jon Snow and Dany and Sansa get married? You want all three of them to get married? I think Jon and Dany are not going to have a baby, but I do think they could get married. And it would be a very cool sequel to Dany's alchemical wedding scene, full of cool symbolism. I actually love that idea. Everybody focuses on the idea that what if they have a kid? I don't think there's enough time for that. But wedding, that would be very cool. Totally dig that. We've had so many good weddings, good weddings where lots of people die. And I mean, why not do one more wedding? So, sun god of fire. Yeah. So Relorism, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think if Relorism was in ancient Dorne, we would have heard about it. But yeah, I mean, the Relorists refer to the sun as basically an emanation of Relor. So it's kind of a sun god religion, kind of not. So the next section is called Good Grief, Durran, what a mess you've made. And we find pretty much the whole Long Night story, including references to the Hammer of the Waters in the Stormlands legends, namely that of Durran Godsgrief, Fair Elenai, and the founding of Storm's End and House Durrandon. The song said that Storm's End had been raised in ancient days by Durran, the first Storm King, who had won the love of Fair Elenai, daughter of the sea god and goddess of the wind. On the night of their wedding, Elenai had yielded her maidenhood to a mortal's love, and thus doomed herself to a mortal's death. And her grieving parents had unleashed their wrath, and sent the winds and waters to batter down Durran's hold. His friends and brothers and wedding guests were crushed beneath collapsing walls or blown out to sea, but Elenai sheltered Durran within her arms, so that he took no harm. And when the dawn came at last, he declared war upon the gods and vowed to rebuild. 5 more castles he built, each larger and stronger than the last, only to see them smashed asunder when the gale winds came howling up Shipbreaker Bay, driving great walls of water before them. His lords pleaded with him to build inland. His priests told him he must placate the gods by giving Elenai back to the sea. Even his small folk begged him to relent. Durran would have none of it. The 7th castle he raised, most massive of all. Some said the children of the forest helped him build it, shaping the stones with magic. Others claimed it was a small boy who told him what he must do, a boy who would grow up to be Bran the Builder. No matter how the tale was told, the end was the same. Though the angry gods threw storm after storm against it, the 7th castle stood defiant, and Durran Godsgrief and Fair Elenai dwelt there together until the end of the days. And by the way, this is definitely a Monty Python reference. So I built another castle. That one burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp. But the 4th one stayed up. And that's what you're going to get, lad. The strongest castle in the sideways. That's definitely a fun nod to that scene. But Durran Godsgrief, okay, so he's the founder of House Durrandon. He's supposed to have lived in the Age of Heroes, right alongside Bran the Builder, who's another Age of Heroes guy. And I'm saying that the Age of Heroes began right after the Long Night. Now, here's the thing. Storm's End is right up the coast from the Stepstones and the Broken Arm of Dorne. And this legend of a great storm and flood wiped out everyone in Durran's family except Durran and Elenai is almost certainly an account of the Hammer of the Waters event. Any sort of sudden collapse of land, which resulted in the sudden joining of 2 oceans, would have resulted in unbelievable tsunamis racing up the newly created narrow sea, and they would have punished anyone near the coastline. And this is exactly what we see in the Durran Godsgrief story. The weather of the area would change forever after this hammer event, as the ocean currents readjusted to the joining of the Summer Sea and the Narrow Sea. And this is also exactly what we see in the Durran Godsgrief legend, which stipulates that the weather of the Narrow Sea changed forever after to be much more stormy. That's a really nice, detailed fit. The Hammer of the Waters event would have created tsunamis. And when we look in the area, we do indeed find an account of a deadly tsunami that killed the friends and family of the main character in the story. Which, by the way, sounds like a cultural bottleneck event. Everyone dies save for one man and his divine wife who sheltered him. This is just the way I'm describing the Long Night bottleneck. If Durran's floods are the Hammer of the Waters floods, then they should happen at the time of the Long Night. And indeed, we hear of mass death striking the Stormlands at this time. Durran's line was established in the aftermath of these events, and he's said to have many, many children. And so that is also a match for my theory that the great houses of the Age of Heroes would mostly have been established right after the Long Night, and this is when the repopulation of the world would have happened. Do you think that the Sacred Order of Green Men in the God's Eye is going to play any role in the books? Do you know of any theories related to it? Yes and yes. Check out Sacred Order of Green Zombies 5, 6, and 7 on this YouTube channel, and I've got all kinds of theories about that. Georgia said we are going to see the God's Eye. I don't know if Bran will go there or someone will go there. Dragon Lords have stopped by the Isle of Faces a couple times in a weird sort of foreshadowing. Adam Valerian and a couple others. Yeah, so Bran could see the Isle of Faces in a vision, or somebody might stop by there. But yes, we are going to see the Isle of Faces. And yes, the Green Men are going to be important. One of my favorite questions. And I might do my old ones theory as an updated video at some point too, because it's fun. All right, so the mythical themes of the Durran story are also a match to other myths. Durran is the Azor Ahai figure. He's trying to obtain something that belongs to the gods, in this case, the daughter of the wind and sea gods. This brings about the great devastation, and there's even the implication of Elenai dying like Nissa Nissa, and that she's doomed to a mortal's death, and her parents grieve over her when she chooses to wed Durran. In some tales, Durran receives help from the children of the forest to stymie the wrath of the gods. Remember, it said they might have helped him build his castle. And that's kind of similar to how the last hero and mankind in general made a pact with the children and received their aid to sort of escape the long night. Oh, hey, thank you, Didelphi. Morphia sent to PayPal. Appreciate that. And there it is. Oh, there's several have come through. Thank you, guys. Oh, I see. You have a secret name, Didelphi. I won't disclose your true name, but thank you. And do let me know if you send a PayPal. Feel free to tag me there in the chat if you have a question. That is awesome. I'm seeing all the tags today. I've got my chat straight, so no more missing tags, no more missing super chats. I've got it going on. So we see echoes of the Hammer of the Waters. We also see echoes of the Hammer of the Waters myth here in the Durran legend. So check this out. The Hammer of the Waters was supposedly called down by the Green Seers on the Isle of Faces. But the Green Seers on the Isle of Faces are probably the Sacred Order of Green Men that we were just being asked about. And they're described as being green-skinned men with antlers on their head like a stag. This is the exact same description we get of the legendary Garth the Green, of course, who was supposedly the first man in Westeros. And here's the kicker. The Durrandon Storm Kings and the Baratheons after them have been wearing something called the Stag Crown, and also putting antlers on their war helms for as long as we're aware of. They're dressing up like green men, in other words. And we really see this with Renly and Robert at times in the story. So they're dressing up like green men, just like the people who drop the Hammer of the Waters are green men. So in mythical terms, both legends have a stag man bringing on the apocalyptic floods. And that may be because these myths are referring to the same events. And if I would go further, a little sidetrack, not on the script here, I will just tell you the idea of Garth the Green being the first man in Westeros may actually be a clue that the green men are real and that they were the first men, that they were here before the first men. And I have a suspicion that when they say wood dancers were like the hunters and warriors of the children, those just might be the green men. I have a feeling. And so that's kind of one of the big secrets about the green men, is that they were here. And the green men certainly, I think when we hear about humans and giants mating together, that may have been actually green men and humans. And so that is why I think all the houses of the Reach supposedly descend from Garth the Green. They actually just means that they descend from green men. But I might do a separate theory on that to flesh that one out. So it's a little sidetrack bonus for you guys. Bonus round. And once again, if you want to read along with the script that I am reading, the link is in the description, and I'll just drop it in the chat again real quick. But it is in the description of the video. If you don't see it in the description, just refresh the page, and it will be there because I just added it midstream. So very interestingly, there also seems to have been a shift in the way. Oh, not quite 420 yet. Okay, I didn't miss it. All right. There seems to have been a shift in the way that the first men of the Stormlands viewed the children of the forest that took place at this time. During Godsgrief originally warred against the children. It said that he took the rainwood from them. But as we just mentioned, Durran may have later allied with the children to build his castle, which is in fact built around a godswood and a heart tree, as the other first men castles were. Even more clear is the story of Durran's son, called Durran the Devout, who returned the rainwood to the children of the forest, which makes us think that the name Devout implies that he worshipped the old gods of the children, the old gods that the first men are known for worshiping. This, too, tracks with my proposed alternate timeline. The shift from warring against the children to adopting their religion should happen in the aftermath of the Long Night, which is exactly when I'm saying that during Godsgrief and then his son Durran the Devout would have lived. Now, it's also true that a century later, it's said that another Durrandon Storm King took the rainwood back from the children again. But like I said earlier, this is a pattern we see all over Westeros. Even after the first men adopted the religion of the children, there was still warring and conquest going on right up to the arrival of the Andals, which kind of finished off the children in all but the most remote places. But I will point out that there was several instances of the first men and the children of the forest aligning together to fight the Andals. And in fact, it happened in the Stormlands. And there's the story of a Durran and Storm King who sought out the children and made something called the Weirwood Alliance. So it seems like George giving us an echo of the Last Hero story. And then, of course, we have the High Heart, where the first men and the children allied against the Andals. So, right? Do I have that right? Were the first men involved at the High Heart, or was that just children? But whether they were or not, like I said, the children and the first men did ally against the first men. So there's a lot of back and forth shifting with those alliances. But the main thing that we're looking at is that the first men adopted the religion of the children after the Pact. All right, so that is this next section break. We're 4 minutes early of 4:20. Gosh. Should I cheat? Hammer of the Waters is what I call my first bong hit. Nice one, Harvard. I feel like dancing, sure sounds good to me. So somebody's asking me here, was this overlapping with the Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood Nets? Yes. Or a myth. Okay, so I'm going to get to that at the end. But yes, this is all, I mean, the Azor Ahai stuff definitely happening at the time of the Long Night. Oh, keep getting uncentered. There we go. Need to be centered so that I'm happy. I don't have a cleavage line to try to center in the camera like Raw Wrist always does. Shout out to Raw Wrist, whose style I totally dig. But yeah, symmetry is always important. So next section is called Galadon of Morning. Yeah, a little Galadon time. Gabe's Logic with a 420 super chat pregame. I might as well just do this now so I don't make you guys, so I don't break in the middle of the section. 1 second. Green screen smoke, goodness. Oh, yes. Wait, green screen, get it? No wonder it interacts well with the smoke. Oh, I even have the mind blown, like, meteor thing happening. Somebody make me a meme. Make me a meme. Let's change the background. New section. This one's been, let's do some. All right. Actually, we're going to talk about Galadon. Do I have a Sword of the Morning type background? I don't. Let's, yeah, I'll leave this one up. This is cool. This works. All right. I guess after 420, we have to hang out in the sacred woods here. All right. So, and by the way, YouTube, we're not sanctioning illegal activities. I live in California. Everything we're doing here is totally legal. So don't send me any hate notes. Galadon of Morning. So before we move on from the Stormlands, guys, there's one more local legend to take a look at, which has many parallels to the Azor Ahai story, and that's the legend of Galadon of Morn. And by the way, this is one of the ones that people ask me about the most. Just randomly, people send me questions. Hey, what about Galadon? Is that kind of like Azor Ahai? Yes, yes, he is. So check this out. Sir Galadon was a champion of such valor that the maiden herself lost her heart to him. She gave him an enchanted sword as a token of her love. The Just Maid, it was called. No common sword could check her, nor any shield withstand her kiss. Sir Galadon bore the Just Maid proudly, but only thrice did he unsheathe her. He would not use the maid against a mortal man, for she was so potent as to make any fight unfair. So there's a lot of parallels to the Lightbringer story here. To wit, Azor Ahai received a magic sword when Nissa Nissa sacrificed her very heart to temper Lightbringer. Galadon of Morn received his magic sword when the maiden herself lost her heart to him. Galadon used the Just Maid 3 times, while Lightbringer had to be forged 3 times. The name Just Maid is derived from the maiden herself and plays on the real-world astronomy of the constellation Virgo, which appears to be holding aloft the scales of Libra in the sky. By the way, that's where we get our image of blind Lady Justice holding the scales. That's Virgo holding Libra. Point being, the sword, and that's, think about it, the Just Maid, just to make sure it's super clear. She's fair, right? She's a fair maiden because she's blind and she holds the scales, so she's a fair maiden. But this is also a pun on the idea of a fair maiden who's very fair and beautiful. So there's extensive wordplay going on with just maids and fair maids in the story. But point is, the sword, the Just Maid, is named for the essence of the woman who lost her heart to create it. That's very similar to Nissa having poured her strength and soul and courage into Lightbringer. And don't forget that the word Lightbringer is synonymous with Venus and Aphrodite. So it, too, is a goddess sword, just like the Just Maid. Galadon and the Just Maid are even associated with dragons. It's said that Galadon slew a dragon with the Just Maid. The name Morn obviously makes us think of Sword of the Morning, especially when Galadon is described as, quote, the perfect knight and, quote, a champion of such valor. A champion of such valor that Dawn, because think about this, Dawn is only given out to the Knights of House Dane who prove themselves worthy. So Dawn is intimately connected with being a champion of such valor, if you will. And then I didn't put this in the notes, but I just noticed if Galadon refused to use the sword against a mortal man, but used it 3 times, well, once he killed a dragon, but who's he swinging it against, the other times? Some sort of not mortal man? The others, the whites, something like that, right? So it's implied that this sword is for killing demons and things. Now, there's even an implication of the Just Maid as a star sword or a meteor sword because, again, the maiden herself is implied as a star lady in multiple ways. As I mentioned, the phrase Just Maid refers to Virgo holding Libra. So Martin is making intentional reference to a zodiacal constellation in the name of the sword. Consider this. Each of the 7 gods of the faith, which uses a lot of astronomy, by the way, is associated with one of the 7 celestial wanderers, which is a phrase that refers to the 5 planets visible from Earth, plus the sun and the moon. Now, if we had to guess which of the wanderers was associated with, quote, the maiden, the only 2 choices really would be Venus or the moon. Venus is, a word for Lightbringer, and the moon, well, that's where the moon meteors came from. So the idea of the maiden giving her heart, well, she's, we have to think of the heart of a fallen star here. The dawn meteorite is called the heart of a fallen star. So when we have a celestial maiden losing her heart to the night of Morn to make a magic sword, well, this really starts to sound like another version of the Lightbringer story. A remix, if you will. And I apologize for doing that. In any case, the Galadon story is given to us by Brienne of Tarth because Morn was an ancient castle on the Isle of Tarth, and Galadon is a local hero there. As if to emphasize the morning-evening symbolism, Morn is complemented by Evenfall Hall on the other side of Tarth, where the Lord is called the Even Star. Thus, we're definitely meant to read Galadon of Morn as tapping into the morning star symbolism of Venus, which means that the Just Maid, Lightbringer, and the sword Dawn all draw their symbolism from Venus. Brienne herself carries around a magic sword. And by the way, Brienne the Beauty is a direct reference to Venus. There's a whole thing there with her and Jaime. But Brienne, so she carries around a magic sword, of course, Oathkeeper, which she compares to the Just Maid. And that's important because Oathkeeper used to be Ned's ice. And Arya compares a blood-soaked red ice to the red comet. Oathkeeper, meanwhile, has been colored blood red, making it a very good symbolic stand-in for Lightbringer. Sword of the Morning / MOURNING morning. Yes, I've made that pun before too, because you wear black when you're in mourning, and so the Night's Watch are dressing in mourning clothes, and they are basically the swords of the morning, but they wear black, while the Kingsguard wear white, and they symbolize the others, and they wear white. So yeah, George is doing a lot of inversions with mourning white and black stuff. Yeah, so Bloodstone Compendium gets into that a little more, I believe. So, ergo, guys, what we have here is the daughter of the Evenstar carrying around a magic red sword and thinking about Galadon of Morn, who had a sword with an origin story that sounds like Lightbringer and Dawn. Now, I don't know why there's a weird version of the Azor High Myth floating around on the Isle of Tarth, but that appears to be the case. And Tarth is very close to Storm's End. It lies basically due west off the coast of Storm's End in Shipbreaker Bay. So between the mythology of Durran, Godsgrief, and Galadon of Morn, we have pretty much the whole mythical astronomy Long Night story. Very cool. Very cool. All right, and we've reached a section break. Could Darkstar be the new sword of the evening? So, Scott, as you probably know, that I have speculated, Darkstar will steal Dawn, which is a great idea of, stealing Dawn. It's kind of like what the others do, right? They steal Dawn. It doesn't come. There's no sunshine. Darkstar he's like a symbol of the long night. He stands in front of the sun and polishes his sword. He's called Darkstar. So yes, I think he's going to steal Dawn. He's going to join the Kingsguard of Fagon. He'll be like a fake Arthur Dane to Fagon's fake Rhaegar, and it'll be just a great fakery of fakeness. and then somebody's going to kill his ass, and eventually John or Danny will get Dawn. I talked about this in the Dawnbringers live stream, so check that out. Crispy, how did I learn all this stuff? I don't know. I think about this way too much, but I get paid to do it, so it's all synergistic now. Which, by the way, I would like to be doing this anyway. So getting paid to do it really just enables me, to spend all my time on this. And that's basically why, if you're donating to the PayPal.me there, or on Super Chat, or signing up for Patreon, basically what you're saying is that you'd like to see me continue to do this, and you want to make it possible for me to do this without having so much anxiety about not being able to pay my bills that I can't write essays. So always a struggle for all of us, but I'm doing my best and putting out the best material I can, and I've been getting a lot of new subscribers, a lot of new patrons. The YouTube numbers are going up, so really appreciate it, guys. Means a lot. It gives me energy to do all this, and I obviously have way too much fun. So let's talk about the weirdest place in Westeros, and oh gosh, I might be able to put a picture of this behind me. Let's do it. I know I have a couple of good Moat Cailin pictures. We're going to Moat Cailin. Do. I was listening to Bob Marley before I started. Sorry, guys. There we go. Let's do the Simonetti one. And I will pan it down here. Yes, perfect. Boom. There's that one. I've also got another one. That's the Renee Agner one. Let's see how that looks. Oh yeah, this actually will probably work better as a background. Oh, no, I got to redo that one. Let's go back to this one. There we go. Okay, so we're at Moat Cailin, guys. We're in the swamp. We're sitting on a stump in the swamp. And this is the weirdest place in Westeros. Yes, it is. So let's move on, guys. Many of you might be fidgeting in your seats to ask, oh, what about the other Hammer of the Waters that fell on the neck? That's a good question. It seems clear that Westeros remembers two destructive flooding and land subsidence events associated with the name Hammer of the Waters, one on the arm of Dorne and one on the neck, but the authors being intentionally vague as to whether or not they fell at the same time. Most people, I think, tend to think that they were two different events, based on the logic that the children were dropping these hammers to try to stop the first men. And so the logic goes that they dropped the second one on the neck after the first one failed to stop them in the south. But the first time we hear of the hammer, the story comes from Old Nan, and it doesn't sound like they dropped two different hammers. And indeed, I don't think they did. Barrel Rider, do you think Jaime could be the Nissa Nissa for Brienne? I like the idea of the role reversal, and it's definitely happened symbolically when they were like fighting in the stream or whatever. However, I don't think Jaime's going to die until he. I think him and Cersei need to like die together. But they do tons of Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa stuff, and in fact, there's a patron-only essay about Jaime and Brienne's chapter when they were visiting Maidenpool and then fighting in the stream, and then when they got arrested. The whole chapter is symbolism. So I made it a we should start back, which means you can read it forwards and backwards, and that's some Illuminati shit. So I do need to do more patron-only stuff, but there is some stuff on there, and that is one of them. I might need to share the link. I think if you just scroll down in the feed of Patreon posts, you will find it. But there is, if you want the Jaime Brienne stuff, then you can get that whole, it's like an 11,000 word essay, actually. So here is the story from Old Nan of the Hammer of the Waters. But some 12,000 years ago, the first... Okay, no, I won't do the whole thing like that. Some 12,000 years ago, the first men appeared from the east, crossing the broken arm of Dorne before it was broken. They came with bronze swords and great leathern shields, riding horses. No horse had ever been seen on this side of the narrow sea. No doubt the children were as frightened by the horses as the first men were by the faces in the trees. That's bullshit, by the way. The children of the forest weren't scared of the horses. Come on. Anyways, as the first men carved out hold-fastened farms, they cut down the faces and gave them to the fire. Horror-struck, the children went to war. The old songs say the Green Seers used dark magics to make the seas rise and sweep away the land, shattering the arm of Dorne. But it was too late to close the door. And there's the closing the barn door reference made right by the maesters. The wars went on until the earth ran red with blood of men and children both. But more children than men, for men were bigger and stronger, and wood and stone and obsidian make a poor match for bronze. Finally, the wise of both races prevailed, and the chiefs and heroes of the first men met the green seers and wood dancers amidst the weirwood groves on a small island in the great lake called the God's Eye. There they forged the Pact. So obviously this is a mythical account of whatever happened back then, but as you can see, there's only one hammer event in this story. There's no reference to the neck here at all, and I suspect that's because all the flooding happened at the same time, and so it suffices to refer to them both at once. I mean, it does stand to reason that the low-lying lands of the neck would have been flooded by those same tsunamis that ravaged Storm's End, just not as severely, right? So the Maesterly summary in The World of Ice and Fire makes it sound like the flooding at the neck and the arm of Dorne are thought of as one event. It says, the hunters among the children, their wood dancers, became their warriors as well, but for all their secret arts of tree and leaf, they could only slow the first men in their advance. The green seers employed their arts, and tales say that they could call the beasts of marsh, forest, and air to fight on their behalf. Direwolves and monstrous snow bears, cave lions and eagles, mammoths and serpents, and more. But the first men proved too powerful, and the children are said to have been driven to a desperate act. Legend says that the great floods that broke the land bridge, that is now the broken arm, and made the neck a swamp, were the work of the green seers who gathered at Moat Cailin to work their dark magic. Let me just read that sentence again, as I broke it weird. Legend says that the great floods that broke the land bridge that is now the broken arm and made the neck a swamp were the work of the green seers who gathered at Moat Cailin to work dark magic. Some contest this, however. The first men were already in Westeros when this occurred, and stemming the tide from the east would do little more than slow their progress. Moreover, such power is beyond even what the green seers are traditionally said to have been capable of, and even those accounts appear exaggerated. All right, so basically, this is the same story that Old Dan told, except for that the location of the summoning is moved from the Isle of Faces to Moat Cailin. Now, you can see the maesters making the same argument that I did about closing the barn door after the horses have escaped, almost as if George Martin is begging us to question the official story of the children causing the hammer. I mean, he's planting a flag on it right there, saying, hey, this doesn't make any sense. In any case, there's really no evidence that there were two separate events, save for the confusion about where it was called down from. And that's actually the part of the myth that is the most questionable to begin with. So like I said, it could well be that the neck was flooded by the breaking of the arm of Dorne. But there's actually a good amount of evidence that there were more than one moon meteor, which struck. There's actually a good amount of evidence that more than one moon meteor struck Westeros, or alternately, that the impact on the arm of Dorne was so severe that it caused earthquakes throughout Westeros. Because there's really no question that the entire midsection of Westeros, from the neck to the Iron Islands, shook with a tremendous violence at some point in the past. The neck isn't just flooded, after all, as we see when we have a look at one of my very favorite places in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is, of course, the very weird Moat Cailin. This is Catelyn Stark, catching sight of the gargantuan abandoned fortress in A Game of Thrones. Just beyond, through the mists, she glimpsed the walls and towers of Moat Cailin, or what remained of them. Immense blocks of black basalt, each as large as a crofter's cottage, lay scattered and tumbled like a child's wooden blocks, half sunk in the soft, boggy soil. Nothing else remained of a curtain wall that had once stood as high as Winterfell's. The wooden keep was gone entirely, rotted away 1,000 years past, with not so much as a timber to mark where it had stood. All that was left of the great stronghold of the first men were 3 towers, 3 where there had once been 20, if the tale tellers could be believed. The gatehouse tower looked sound enough, and even boasted a few feet of standing wall to either side of it. The drunkard's tower, off in the bog where the south and west walls had once met, leaned like a man about to spew a bellyful of wine into the gutter. And the tall, slender children's tower, where legends said that the children of the forest had once called upon their nameless gods to send the hammer of the waters, had lost half its crown. Ooh, got red marks from this thing. Better keep it on. Okay. It looked as if some great beast had taken a bite out of the crenellations along the tower top and spit the rubble across the bog. All 3 towers were green with moss. So try to picture this, guys. Blocks of black basalt as big as a cottage. Those would weigh many, many tons. You got to be like 15 feet tall or something, 20 feet by 10 feet. I mean, these are big blocks with megalithic construction, And so they used to be stacked up 50 to 80 feet tall to make a wall. So this really is megalithic construction here, almost as if the castle were built on a scale intended for giants. The level of difficulty involved here is far, far beyond the ring forts and primitive castles of the first men. And indeed, we do not see anything remotely close to this type of construction anywhere else in Westeros. Period. Full stop. Nothing close. The only possible match is actually Yin on Sothorios, which I do absolutely have a picture of. We've got a good one of Yin. Oh, yeah, this one. Cool. So Yin is made of oily black stone in massive blocks so heavy it would require a dozen elephants to move them. When Theon sees Moat Cailin in A Dance with Dragons, George seems to be teasing us with the idea that these huge blocks of black basalt are actually the dreaded oily black stone, just like at Yin. And here's that quote. It says, "Where once a mighty curtain wall had stood, only scattered stones remained. Blocks of black..." Sorry. No, this is the same quote. It sounds similar to the last quote, but it is actually, this is a different one. Sorry. "Where once a mighty curtain wall had stood, only scattered stones remained. Blocks of black basalt so large, it must have once taken 100 men to hoist them into place. Some had sunk so deep into the bog that only a corner showed. Others lay strewn about like some god's abandoned toys, cracked and crumbling, spotted with lichen. Last night's rain had left the huge stones wet and glistening, and the morning sunlight made them look as if they were coated in some fine black oil." Too stoned to say anything profound, so keep up the great work. Hey, thanks. Works for me. I'm just stoned enough to be able to talk correctly, so we're both in just the right headspace. So there's the fine black oil quote. Make of it what you will. I don't know whether this is meant to say that this is oily stone or not. We do know that it's black basalt, but we don't know what the oily stone is. So the oily stone itself could be basalt. Basalt is a silicate rock, meaning like obsidian, it comes from lava and magma and stuff like that. So kind of fits the vibe of the oily stone potentially to be basalt. In any case, the building style of Moat Cailin and Yin match very closely. They're both built in swampy jungles, and Moat Cailin is abandoned and dammed, almost like Yin is. So if Moat Cailin's black basalt does turn out to be oily black stone, if we get confirmation of that in the future, it really wouldn't come as a surprise. But whether or not it's oily stone, I think the easy conclusion is that Moat Cailin was built a very long time ago. Quite possibly, Yin and Moat Cailin are Martin's way of showing us that the Deep Ones used to rule the earth tens of thousands of years ago, or perhaps these places are connected to the Great Empire of the Dawn. But Moat Cailin wasn't built by no first men that we know of. That's what I'm saying. And as such, it's already almost certainly a pre-Long Night structure. Quite possibly like very pre-Long Night. So that makes sense, because think about it, guys. It's built in a swamp. Swamps are not where you build castles, usually. How exactly does one gain leverage to stack cottage-sized blocks of rock 80 feet into the air in a swamp? Where do you put the giant cranes and pulleys, or the ramps solid enough to bear the weight of such blocks, such as were probably used at the pyramids? Building Moat Cailin on solid, dry ground is already a task well beyond the first men that we know of. And doing so miles into an uninhabitable swamp is basically unthinkable. It's far, far more likely that Moat Cailin was built when the neck was solid ground, before it was inundated by the Hammer of the Waters event. You guys with me here? I think I'm talking sense here. So yes, this too, this tracks, right? Because Moat Cailin is pretty messed up. These unbelievably large and heavy stone blocks that used to comprise the fortress are strewn all about the bog, like a child's wooden blocks or like a god's toys. That sounds like more than just the land subsiding under the fortress and causing a collapse. Both descriptions make it sound like they were hurled around the bog. So if one moon meteor caused the tremendous violence of the breaking of the arm of Dorne, then certainly this kind of destruction could be attributed to either the same meteor impact or a similar one that fell somewhere nearby. And after all, the destruction here at the neck and down south of the Arm of Dorne are both attributed to the same thing, the Hammer of the Waters. I'm just saying that thing was a moon meteor, which was remembered as a hammer that fell from the sky and struck the waters and the earth. So, if you think about it, yeah, exactly. No, that's my point, is that we don't know that the swamp was there before the Hammer of the Waters. I'm guessing that it wasn't. And I'm saying that at some point it couldn't have been swamp, because that's the only way you could have built a megalithic structure like that. So it must have been dry ground at some point. So now if you think about it, these tales of the children of the forest being the ones to call the hammer down from Moat Cailin are even more dubious than the ones of them calling it down from the Isle of Faces. So the children of the forest gathered at the top of a dark tower in a giant castle made of black stone to work their nature-based greenseer magic. Okay, that doesn't sound like the children, right? They're never found in castles or towers, but rather tree towns and caves and the deep woods. Azor Ahai working dark sorcery in a dark tower, sure, that I can buy, but the children of the forest? Yeah, so as I mentioned, the flooding and land subsidence in this area extends to the Iron Islands as well. I don't know why I said Iron Islands like that. I think I need a drink. Yes, the flooding and land subsidence does extend to the Iron Islands, and we find a lot of the same elements there. A castle that might be older than the first men, massive land collapse, and even oily black stone. And, oh yes, something about a dragon. We can't forget that. All right, so let's take a quick pause. We're now going to go talk to, we're going to talk about the Iron Islands. So let me pull up an Iron Islands picture. So there's some good Pike artwork. Ooh, that's a good one from Daniel Jimenez Villalba. Yes, that's it. Beep boop 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 boop. I need to put that on my YouTube channel, just that song. There we go. And oh, I've got a limit of backgrounds. Okay, I got to delete one. Oh, that's all right. Delete. Add. And presto, we are now at Pike. Yes, we are. On the Iron Islands. All right. And actually, guys, I need to run to the restroom super quick. That happens when you go 2 hours on a live stream. One quick moment. I'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves. And we're back. Oh, I only lost like 5 viewers. Thanks, guys. You all are the best. Either that or got nothing to do on Wednesday afternoon. In any case, I appreciate your patience. And we're now ready to talk about Castle Pike and the Seastone chair. This is going to get fun. I've got some new stuff for you here, guys, and also some highly condensed stuff from Weirwood Compendium. So the Iron Islands mythology is the most developed of any religion or culture in A Song of Ice and Fire. By far, I would say. George went to town on this. He really had a lot of fun with it, and I've written about it extensively, as it is highly symbolic. So check out Weirwood Compendium 1, The Grey King and the Sea Dragon, if you like Ironborn mythology and you want my full explanation of it. And also point you towards the Disputed Lands YouTube channel. Crowfood's daughter's got a really cool Iron Islands mythology video, at least one, maybe more than one. So in any case, we don't need to go to that level of depth today because we don't have an extra 2 hours, but there are a few basic things to notice. First off, Castle Pike, which you see me behind me right there. It's very old. It's actually so old, nobody knows who built it. And here's the quote. Pike is so ancient that no one can say with certainty when it was built, nor name the lord who built it. Like the Seastone chair, its origins are lost in mystery. Once, centuries ago, Pike was as other castles, built upon solid stone, on a cliff overlooking the sea, with a wall and keeps and towers and stuff. But the cliffs it rested upon were not as solid as they seemed, and beneath the endless pounding of the waves, they began to crumble. Walls fell, the ground gave way, outer buildings were lost. What remains of Pike today is a complex of towers and keeps scattered across half a dozen islets and sea stacks above the booming waves. A section of curtain wall with the great gatehouse and defensive towers stretches across the headland, the only access to the castle, and is all that remains of the original fortress. A stone bridge from the headland leads to the first and largest islets and the great keep of Pike. Is that islets or islets? I-S-L-E-T-S. I never know how to say that one. It's one of those weird words. So somebody tell me. Oh, cool. Thanks, Kraken Tacos, for putting the Disputed Lands link in the chat there. Yeah, somebody sounded out for me in the chat, so I don't sound like a moron. I sound a little bit smarter, at least saying that I don't know how to say it, so that if I did say it wrong, you know, I'm less of a prancing jackanapes or whatever. Oh, and by the way, yes, y'all enjoying my Tool shirt here, I hope. Oh, yes. Islet. Thank you, Islet. So I was wrong. Islet. Moron. Hey, why are you saying islet, moron? Learn how to talk. All right, I've cut you off, YouTube commenter. Cut you off at the pass. So what's interesting, guys, is that there are no records of Pyke being built or of the disaster that struck it. Now, true, it's possible that the state of the castle could be the result of erosion by the waves, like the maesters say, but it's also possible that this land collapse could have happened all at once. It's not just a little erosion, after all, but the collapse of most of the land that the castle sits on. And I will just tell you, oh, thank you, Catherine Miller, also piping up with the super chat. Say islets. There's a lot of symbolism that I don't have time for that supports the idea that there's a meteor impact. I'm going to give you some of that, but I feel pretty strongly about this one. So, guys, my thinking here is that Castle Pyke was built before the Long Night, was nearly destroyed by the floods and earthquakes brought on by the meteor impacts, and was then later rediscovered by the first people to re-inhabit the Iron Highlands after the Long Night. And I just put an H on Highlands. The Iron Highlands. The Iron Islands. A couple of things to point to this, guys. So the Seastone chair is one, and the round tower design of the castle, which somebody asked about earlier. Round towers are supposedly something that was beyond the capabilities of the first men and even the early Andals. And this idea has actually been used by the maesters to date castles throughout Westeros. That's what you do when you're a maester. You date castles. You bring them flowers and stand outside their window and play the guitar. Okay, so they use this to date the castles, to say when they were built. And we see this when they discuss Winterfell's first keep. So here's the quote. The oldest of these, a long abandoned tower, round and squat and covered with gargoyles, has become known as the first keep. Some take this to mean that it was built by the first men, but Maester Kennett has definitively proved that it could not have existed before the arrival of the Andals, since the first men in the early Andals raised square towers and keeps. Round towers came sometime later. Now, I think that that is mostly true, with only a couple of exceptions. Okay, so the first keep at Winterfell, well, it's thought to have been rebuilt more than once. So it's probably, the Andals are probably right here. The Maesters are probably right. The round tower design of it probably does come after the Andals got here. It's possible that it doesn't. It could be that they're wrong. It does have the gargoyles, and the gargoyles are so heavily eroded that they're lumpy, they don't even have shapes anymore. But it snows and the weather's harsh in the north, so I don't know. Hard to say about the first keep. I think that what we're supposed to understand about Winterfell is basically that the crypts below are the thing. The crypts are the oldest part. The castle was built around the crypts in the Godswood. That's the deal with Winterfell. But now, the Sea Tower of Pyke, totally different story. So check out this quote. The Sea Tower rose from the outmost island at the point of the broken sword. And in the previous paragraph, they're referring to the peninsula of land as a broken sword. It thrust into the ocean, and then it was broken, which is just, meteor imagery. But in any case, the Sea Tower rose from the outmost island at the point of the broken sword of land, the oldest part of the castle, round and tall, the sheer-sided pillar on which it stood, half eaten through by the endless battering of the waves. So the peninsula of land the castle Pyke sits on, like I said, is compared to a broken sword, which is, I think, a clue that the land might have been shattered in one violent incident, like a sword breaking. And I can't help but notice that, like I said, there's lots of symbolism here. George places the red comet in the sky right above Castle Pyke in this scene. It's the one where Theon returns home to the Iron Islands, as if to say, gee, I wonder what could break the land in such a violent way. Oh, look, there's a huge red comet. Anyway, so symbolism aside, Pyke's outer curtain wall and the Sea Tower, both named as original parts of the castle, are clearly round, but they're far too old to be Andal construction. They're so old no one knows who built them, right? So the clash between the Andals and the Iron Islanders actually came pretty late in the Andal conquest and is a matter of historical record for the most part. Pyke, on the other hand, is so old nobody remembers who built it, like I keep saying. So this raises questions about Storm's End too, since it's comprised of one giant round tower and is thought of as being built before the Andals arrived. Although we have no idea if it's been rebuilt over the years, like the first keep. So the main clue about Storm's End is that it has spells set into the walls, just like the Wall of Westeros, the Great Wall of Ice. So the original Storm's End, I do think was a Long Night era creation, but we just don't know if it was the current shape that it is now. So kind of throwing my hands up there and there on that one, but that's not really the thing. I really want to focus on Castle Pike. So think about this. When we take a look at Pike, we can see that like Moat Cailin, the building techniques here are hard to attribute to the first men that we know of because they don't make round towers anywhere. Instead, we have to wonder about men who came before the first men, or perhaps the similar idea that there were multiple groups of people that got lumped together under the homogeneous term first men. And after all, there are stories that someone was here on the islands long before the first men. We first hear of this in A Clash of Kings when Theon sees the Seastone chair. And it says, Lord Balin occupied the Seastone chair, carved in the great shape of a great kraken from an immense block of oily black stone. Legend says the first men had found it standing on the shores of Old Wick when they came to the Iron Islands. Now we get more of this in the world of Ice and Fire. And it says, a possibility arises for a third race to have inhabited the seven kingdoms in the Dawn Age, but it's so speculative that it need only be dealt with briefly. Among the Ironborn, it is said that the first of the first men to come to the Iron Isles found the famous Seastone chair on Old Wick, but that the isles were uninhabited. If true, the nature and origin of the chair's makers are a mystery. Maester Kurth, in his collection of Ironborn legends, Songs the Drowned Men Sing, has suggested that the chair was left by visitors from across the Sunset Sea. But there's no evidence for this, only speculation. You can hear the Maester, only speculation. Okay, so clearly the great empire of the Deep Ones came here first, right? And they left the Seastone chair behind when they left because, well, it was just too big and heavy to fit on the ship. Or maybe they have tons of Kraken-shaped chairs and they just left one by mistake. Bill, I thought there was supposed to be 100 Kraken chairs in the hold. I almost see 99. I don't know why squishers talk like rednecks. But in any case, you know, whatever the case is, the Seastone chair is definitely the curse to oily black stone. And it's definitely pulled straight from H.P. Lovecraft. George is quite intentionally evoking the idea of Deep Ones here, which fits well with the idea of Moat Cailin as a match for Yeen that may also be made of oily black stone, because all these places are like Deep One hotspots, right? Put that together with the abundant legends of Deep Ones, Merlings, and Squishers that sort of spread across the midsection of Westeros, from the Iron Islands to the Riverlands, where they all dress up like fish people, don't forget, to the Neck, where we find the Cranog Men, and then, of course, Cracklaw Point and Driftmark, where we hear about Squishers and Merlings. So you can see the author here hinting at a previous cycle of existence, ruled by fish people, the great empire of the Squishers, more or less. And so I don't think that this is anything that George will really ever confirm. This is only supposed to be a hint of a previous civilization from the remotest history. I mean, in Lovecraft's universe, there are races of elder beings that vanished from the earth literally like hundreds of thousands of years ago or more. And that may be what Martin is trying to evoke here. Well, for our purposes, consider that the Seastone chair was supposedly found on the beach of Old Wick by people who found the Iron Islands uninhabited. So that's interesting, right? Someone must have moved it from Old Wick to Pike and then to the Great Keep. Who did that? Was that before or after Pike was damaged? Whomever found it on the beach, did they find it already carved into a Kraken shape, or was that done later? Nobody seems to know, just as nobody seems to know who built Pike or when. And there's also no specific record mentioned of the land Pike is built on falling into the sea. I mean, it's presumed that it happened, but it's never mentioned that like half, so-and-so Greyjoy's family died one time because part of the castle gave way during a feast or something. In other words, there's a huge historical blind spot around everything concerning the Seastone chair and Castle Pike. And the most likely reason for this is that they were made before the Long Night. The massive land collapse at Pike and the Iron Islands in general was in turn most likely caused during the Long Night. Surprising nobody. This is what I think, right? So the fact that the Maesters and the Ironborn alike keep talking about a lost race of men that once existed on the Iron Islands may also be explained by bottleneck. This could basically be no more than a foggy memory of life before the Long Night. Archmaester Hereg once advanced the interesting notion that the ancestors of the Ironborn came from some unknown land west of the Sunset Sea, citing the legend of the Seastone chair. The throne of the Greyjoys, carved into the shape of a kraken from an oily black stone, was said to have been found by the first men when they first came to Old Wick. Hereg argued that the chair was the product of the first inhabitants of the islands, and only the later histories of the Maesters and Septons alike began to claim that they were in fact descended of the first men. Oh, hey, look, it's the Andals lumping things together again and calling it first men. I can't believe it's not first men. Someone else noticed too. That's cool. Anyways, the passage finishes with the fun line, but this is the purest speculation, and in the end, Hereg himself dismissed the idea, and so must we. And of course, anytime the World of Ice and Fire says, oh, well, we've got to dismiss that idea, of course, it reads very like a hint to do the opposite. We have Archmaester Hereg here, as well as Maester Kurth from the last quote, both suggesting that there may have been a lost epoch of Ironborn history, that today's Ironborn may have an older, non-First Men ancestor. This argument is bolstered by the fact that the Ironborn have always been skilled seafarers, while the First Men were decidedly not. And there are other cultural practices that set the Ironborn apart as well. And that's to say nothing of Maester Theron, our author of Strange Stone, who apparently believes in the great empire of the Deep Ones. He suggested that a race of half-humans, sired by Deep Ones, were lurking around Westeros in the ancient past and may be responsible for the Seastone chair, and that the Ironborn may descend from these fishy folk. So look, we don't know exactly what's going on here, but that's kind of the point. After Galen Whitestaff organizes the first King's Moot in Ironborn history, we start getting lists of kings from houses that we know of, that still exist, and semi-historical records that can be cross-referenced against other histories from other regions. But before that, there's this super foggy period where we kind of think somebody was there, but we don't know if they were first men or fish people or foreigners from across the Sunset Sea. Remember they were. They left only the oily black stone carved in the shape of a kraken and perhaps the castle Pike to remember them by. And nearly all other records of them were erased. And of course, that's just the sort of thing that is neatly explained by a cultural reset like the Long Night. That's the end of the section. So guys, you see what I'm saying here about understanding the idea of the Long Night as a cultural bottleneck helps us sort out all of the history, because it's just very simple. Like the Long Night, everybody would have died. And so that tells us a lot of things. All these events that sound like everyone died, it's like, well, that's probably happened at the time of the Long Night. And then you combine it with the physical evidence and it kind of all stacks up. You've got these castles that look to advance for the first men that are all in this decrepit state, clearly built before the Long Night, Moat Cailin and Pike. So somebody was here building fancy stuff and not just the fused stone at Old Town. So I think Ashai is reverse Atlantis. What do you mean reverse Atlantis? Do you mean that instead of being drowned, it was like smoked out? Or I don't know. I definitely think there's tons of Atlantis parallels. Obviously, I talked about that in the Great Empire of the Dawn video. Valyria and Great Empire of the Dawn both borrow from Atlantis. But Valyria is actually more like Rome and Nazi Germany combined more than anything else. But that's a whole different subject. So, smoking the silver seaweed, guys. Oh, I guess maybe I should. Just, yeah, 1 second here. Good. Yeah, tap it out there. And so this next section is called Smoking the Silver Seaweed. And we're going to talk about seaweed tapestries and the Great King and some other stuff like that. Yada, yada, yada. Yada, yada, yada. Let me mute the mic real quick. So, saving the best for last. We actually do have an Ironborn legend, the oldest one actually, which describes both a long-lost golden age and its destruction by flood. That's right. The legends of the Grey King are extensive and heavily laced with symbolism. But if we boil down the timeline of the story, that's basically what we have. If you squint a little, you can even see moon meteors, but we'll get to that. This is the inner monologue of Aaron Dampere from A Feast for Crows. But that was in the dawn of days, when mighty men still dwelt on earth and sea. The hall had been warmed by Naga's living fire, which the Grey King had made his thrall. On its walls hung tapestries woven from silver seaweed, most pleasing to the eyes. The Grey King's warriors, bounty of the sea, at a table in the shape of a great starfish, whilst seated upon thrones carved from mother of pearl. That's actually the nicest thing. I want mother of pearl throne. That would be like glimmering. You almost couldn't look at it. That would really be something. Anyways, gone. All the glory gone. Men were smaller now. Their lives had grown short. The storm god drowned Naga's fire after the Grey King's death. The chairs and tapestries had been stolen. The roof and walls had rotted away. Even the Grey King's great throne of fangs had been swallowed by the sea. Only Naga's bones endured to remind the Ironborn of all the wonder that had been. And actually, just real quick, a throne of Mother of Pearl actually sounds a lot like a pearl palanquin, such as the God Emperor was carried around on. Interesting. In any case, like I was saying, there's a glorious golden age full of mighty men and very impressive furniture and wall hangings, which was washed away by a great flood, right? This lines up very well with my proposed timeline, where the destruction of the Long Night acts as a line of demarcation between the barely remembered fairy tale-like Dawn Age and the far more historical, but still mythicized, Age of Heroes. Additionally, we're told that after the Grey King's death, which is when the floods came, we had tremendous war and strife. And says, the Grey King was king over all the Iron Islands, but he left 100 sons behind him, and upon his death they began to quarrel over who would succeed him. Brother killed brother in an orgy of kinslaying until only 16 remained. These last survivors divided up the islands between them. All the great houses of the Ironborn claimed descent from the Grey King and his sons, save, curiously, the good brothers of Old Wick and Great Wick, who supposedly derived from the Grey King's leal eldest brother. So after the Grey King's death, great floods washed away his kingdom and his works and his tapestries and his thrones. And then we have an orgy of kinslaying. This is remembered as a simple contest over the throne, over the kingdom, which seems a bit over the top. The guy rules for 1,000 years and 7, but didn't leave anything stable behind. His sons just tore his kingdom apart for greed and didn't stop until 84 out of 100 brothers were dead. Maybe. But maybe this time of total anarchy and war, described as following after the Great Flood, is simply their memory of the desperate fight for resources that would have occurred as the Long Night wore on. And then on the other side of this chaos, some sort of new cultural equilibrium was reached, with 16 regional kings or lords holding power. And this sounds a lot like human society reasserting itself after the total anarchy of the Long Night. So you see what I'm saying here? You can see this Long Night timeline sort of, Palanquin. Sorry, I always say Palanquin. Thanks, Palanquin. Islet. The Palanquin on the islet. I got to put together a sentence of all my horribly pronounced words just to make everyone like, okay, I won't do that. Okay, so the man, like I said, who, Okay, so the man who organized the very first Kingsmoot and forbade the Ironborn to kill each other, to do the whole orgy of kinslaying thing, was, like I said, Galen Whitestaff, whose whitestaff was said to be made either from weirwood or one of Naga's bones, which are actually weirwood. So he had a weirwood staff, in other words, and he helped organize the nascent Ironborn culture. That reminds me a bit of the Children of the Forest helping mankind to survive the Long Night and then shaping subsequent First Man culture. It's just a soft echo, but I thought I'd mention it. And I've got a super chat here. Alaria, love to see your streams live. About to roll up. Oh, some black hash. Shh. Running very low. What are you smoking today? I'm legal things. I'll just say that, legal things. I'm running low too, by the way. So if you want to keep the smoke coming, PayPal.me, Mythical Astronomy. Thank you. In any case, as many of you will know, the Grey King himself is an obvious Prometheus Lucifer figure who compares very well to Azor Ahai, and his myths contain tantalizing hints of moon meteors. The Grey King is credited for bringing the fire of the gods to man, just like Prometheus, and he did this in two ways. One, by slaying the sea dragon Naga, and then he also taunted the storm god into setting a tree ablaze with a mighty thunderbolt. Now, meteorites have been referred to as thunderstones in world mythology. Not hard to figure that out, why they would do that. And they were thought of as a sort of terrifying sort of lightning strike on steroids. So it doesn't take a great leap of imagination to realize that this account of a great thunderbolt from the storm god that brought the fire of the gods to man may well be the local mythicization of one of the meteor strikes. Lightbringer is definitely a fire of the gods symbol, and the same goes for stars that fall out of the sky to earth. So the idea that this thunderbolt is thought of as bringing heavenly fire to mankind actually makes a lot of sense. The storm god myth actually has the Grey King directly challenging the storm god, which reminds us of Durran Godsgrief, stealing the daughter of the wind and sea gods, but also of the Bloodstone Emperor's apostasy when he cast down the true gods to worship a black stone that had fallen from the sky. The Bloodstone Emperor's fire of the gods was an actual meteorite, and the same may be true of the Grey King, in fact. And as for the sea dragon, well, if a fiery meteor falling out of the sky can be seen as a fire-breathing dragon, what do we call a meteor which lands in the sea and causes giant tsunamis? The Grey King's greatest feat, however, was the slaying of Naga, largest of the sea dragons, a beast so colossal that she was said to feed on leviathans and giant krakens and drown whole islands in her wrath. Now, there may or may not be fire-breathing sea monsters in A Song of Ice and Fire. We just don't know. But I'm pretty sure about the moon meteors. I think they definitely happened. And this fire-breathing sea dragon, quote-unquote, that drowns whole islands, well, I mean, that's exactly what a meteor landing offshore or just near the shore would do. And this is also exactly what happened at the Arm of Dorn, where large swaths of land were drowned. If there was a meteor impact somewhere near the Iron Islands, which triggered the collapse of land that we see at Pike, it could very well be remembered in legend as a dragon which lives in the sea and drowns the land, causing it to collapse into the sea. Now, the Grey King was said to possess Naga's fire, and if Naga was actually a meteor impact near the Iron Islands, well, it might be the Seastone chair itself. It's not too big to be a meteorite. It's a black stone, just like the Bloodstone Emperor's meteor was. And, of course, one of the best theories for the oily look of the oily black stone is vitrification, such as is found on meteorites or by, stone that's on the earth that gets burnt when the meteorite crashes to the ground. Because meteorites, when they fall, they push a wave of compressed, superheated air, 1,000 degrees or more, in front of it. So they end up vaporizing and burning everything right before they hit. That's why I talked about vaporized rock and stuff like that. So vitrification does have that slick, greasy, wet look to it. So that is one of the possible explanations for the oily stone, is that it's all vitrified. In any case, I can't prove that the Seastone chair is a meteor, but I did think I would mention it. It is one of the few ways that we can make sense of the idea of the Grey King possessing the fire of the sea dragon. After all, we know that making magic swords from magic meteorites is a thing in A Song of Ice and Fire, and there are ancient Ironborn tales of them using black weapons that drank the souls of those they slew. By the way, that's what Lightbringer did. It drank Nisinis's soul. So we could even have meteor swords lurking around here. It could be all Great Empire of the Dawn connected. All that's in play. So finally, and I can't even go into any depth on this, I will tell you that there are certain clues that the Grey King was some sort of green seer, or that he tapped into those weirwood powers somehow. The famous bones of Naga that formed his great hall seemed to be petrified weirwood, perhaps the ribbing of an ancient ship that was flipped over and made into a long haul, which is something that happens in the real world. And more importantly, his throne and crown may have been made from weirwood, which would imply him as a green seer. Because think about Bloodraven sitting in the weirwood roots. He's basically in a weirwood throne with weirwood roots wrapped around his head like a crown. So if the storm god's thunderbolt was a long night moon meteor, and the Grey King was a dude who sat on a weirwood throne, a green seer, well, it's the Hammer of the Waters story all over again. Green seers calling down moon meteors, right? So the storm god's thunderbolt Well, it supposedly set a tree ablaze, and somehow this imparted the fire of the gods to man. But as I've pointed out in the Weirwood Compendium series and elsewhere, the Weirwood trees are implied as symbolic flaming trees by virtue of their red leaf canopy being described as a blaze of flame among the green. And they obviously impart a form of the power of the gods to mankind, just like the Grey King's burning tree. And of course, all of this divine burning tree idea, all of this imagery goes back to Moses' burning bush. So if the Grey King is possessing the fire of the gods through a burning tree, well, that's probably a reference to a weirwood. And it's also said that he made longships from weirwoods too. So there's all kinds of weirwood in the Grey King myth. And basically what I'm saying here is that the storm god Thunderbolt legend and the sea dragon legend, they each seem to have references to both moon meteors and weirwood magic. And those are basically the two elements of the Hammer of the Waters event, if you believe that the Hammer of the Waters is a moon meteor. So, sum up everything since we started talking about Moat Cailin and the Hammer of the Waters falling on the neck. I think the long night moon meteors were the thing which broke and flooded Westeros in various places, from the Arm of Dorne to the Neck to the Iron Islands. I think possibly Castle Pike and definitely Moat Cailin were built before the Long Night, and I think their heavily damaged state reflects the devastating power of the Long Night disaster. Almost all record of the people, or fish people, who built these structures was erased by the Long Night cultural bottleneck, leaving only vague rumors and folktales behind to explain their mighty works. When humans began to repopulate the Iron Islands, they found the Seastone chair and Castle Pike and maybe a few weird-looking locals with webbed fingers and very strange stories about where it all came from. From this point on began a period of somewhat historical record with ruling houses and lineages arising that still exist today. Everything that came before, the previous culture of high magic and fancy tapestries, the floods and meteor impacts would have washed all that away, and they are remembered in fantastical mythical language, just like all the other stuff from the quote-unquote Dawn Age. So there we go. I am almost finished. We're ready for the concluding section, guys. And I'm going to go back to my moon meteor background so I feel at my tip-top shape. There we are. So at this point, depending on how many of my mythical astronomy podcasts that you've consumed, you may be wondering about the cause of these moon meteor hammers, meaning the official Hammer of the Waters legend places blame with the Green Seers performing blood sacrifice either on the Isle of Faces or at Moat Cailin, while the Eastern legends say it was the Azor High or the Bloodstone Emperor murdering a woman that did it. And the Grey King and the Durran Godsgrief legends say the destructive floods came when the first and greatest king in their cultural history challenged or stole from the gods. So is there a universal truth here to be sussed out? Yes, of course there is. I believe there is, anyways. There's abundant evidence that Azor High was himself either a Green Seer or one who stole the power of the Green Seers. I think that's actually the best way to think about it. And that Nissa Nissa was part Child of the Forest, or maybe even part Green Man, if that's a separate thing. The Weirwood Compendium has the full breakdown here, and check out my two scripted Great Empire of the Dawn videos also, Dragon Lords of Ancient Ashai and Westeros. Sorry, I just need to stretch out my leg a little bit here. The cross leg, crisscross applesauce has its limits. So the basic idea here is that the Great Empire of the Dawn, who controlled dragons before the Valyrians did, probably built Ashai, came to Westeros in the Dawn Age before the Long Night, and the purpose would have been something to do with the magic of the Children of the Forest. It's pretty much implied that that's what they came for. And it's the logical thing to come to Westeros for, is the Children of the Forest magic. So we don't know how long this cross-cultural contact was going on for. But what seems the most clear is that Nissa Nissa was sacrificed by Azor High because she was part Child of the Forest. And I'm purely talking about my own headcanon here. This is not some part of the World of Ice and Fire that you haven't read. This is the sum result of years of symbolic research. There are so many things pointing to Nissa Nissa being a Child of the Forest. And that really does the nice job of tying all the dragons and Azor High shit to all the Green Seer stuff. That's the whole thing. Nissa Nissa is a Child of the Forest, and Azor Ahai kills her to gain access to the Weirwood net. She already has an inherent connection to the Weirwood net, and Azor Ahai, by doing a blood magic ritual, somehow uses her as a gateway to the Weirwoods. And that's also why there's all this Weirwood door symbolism and stuff. So I have a feeling that this blood magic rite actually did go down on the Isle of Faces, meaning Azor Ahai killed Nissa Nissa, probably on the Isle of Faces, I think. I mean, even though the legend is from the East, kind of has to happen in Westeros, I think, because this is what the Westeros is the center of the story. So in any case, I think what we've got here is the conflation of two stories about blood magic ritual sacrifice, which brought on incredible devastation. The murder of Nissa Nissa, which broke the moon, and the sacrifice of either humans or children of the forest on the Isle of Faces to call down the Hammer of the Waters. So that could be the same thing, basically. And I would also further elaborate, and this is in the Old Ones episodes of the Sacred Order of Green Zombies. When Azor Ahai killed Nissa Nissa, the child of the forest, he may well have murdered other children of the forest or green men at the same time. And this might be part of what created the others, but that's a whole different tangent. So it was the idea that a lot of children of the forest were murdered to call down the Hammer of the Waters could be pretty close to the truth. It's just that Azor Ahai is the one performing the murder. And he actually is kind of a green seer. So you could say the green seers did it, but really it was Azor Ahai. That's what I think. So is there a way to steer a comet into a moon and blow it up with Weirwood magic or any other kind of magic? Or did Azor Ahai perhaps time his blood magic ritual to the moment of celestial doom as a way of harnessing magical power? Perhaps he merely performed his dark deed sometime during the long night, like around the same time, and that as the legend developed, the murder itself began to be thought of as the thing which broke the moon and caused the sun to hide its face. We probably won't be able to answer that question until we see what Euron does to call down the moon meteor that causes the new long night in the winds of winter. We'll see. We'll see. But I do think, to answer the question I get a lot, how will we know if your theories are right? Well, let's see what causes the new long night. That's going to tell us a lot. So, in any case, the last question... Oh, no, I actually don't want to go into this. I was going to mention the others, but I will just say, like I said, that I do think that the others were created accidentally or intentionally when this blood magic ritual went down on the Isle of Faces. All the evidence points to the others as being tree spirits of some kind. George Martin calls them Icy She, as Quinn told us in his video about the White Walkers all those years ago, one of his classic videos. The She are spirits of the mounds. They're kind of like nature spirits. They're kind of like spirits of the dead. So when Martin calls them Icy She, he's describing them as like elementals, icy elemental spirits, perhaps associated with dead spirits. And so what I think is essentially that the Weirwoods were the original home of the others. And what we see now is the others are actually like exiled tree spirits that were kicked out of the Weirwood net so that humans had a space to go in. And so the Weirwood trees are actually being whited. That's why they're white trees. They're like zombie trees. They look like zombies, bloody faces and stuff. And essentially their treeness has been carved out, and that's what the others are. And the green seers are inside the Weirwoods against their will. That is, again, the result of lots of symbolic research. So that's what I think happened. I think this thing that went down on the Isle of Faces that perhaps broke the moon, that led Azor Ahai into the Weirwood net, also created the others, caused the long night. So all of it dates back to this one event. And then sometime later, we have the Pact and the Children of the Forest allying with the remaining humans to defeat the others. And yes, so the others are basically frozen greenmen, Stone Dancer. That's what we're talking about. Because, originally the classic idea of elves is that basically elves are kind of like dryads. They're spirits of the trees. They're avatars of the trees, guardians of the trees, symbiotic relationship with the trees. And I think the others are heavily implied as being just that, except for they're frozen and they're pissed off because their connection to their trees has been like severed or screwed with by Azor Ahai. And that's another idea that I think backs up all of this, is that the children can't be responsible for the Hammer of the Waters, because the Hammer of the Waters is like this great act of devastation. And if it's the long night event, well, I really think that mankind has to be the one that's responsible for the original sin. You can't blame that on the elves. Just like the show showed us that the children of the forest created the others. That doesn't make sense. The others are like, they should be a consequence of mankind's sin. And it kind of is, because like the humans hunted the children, and so the children got desperate and made the others. But it's still the children's fault for making the others in the show canon. And that doesn't seem right to me. So the idea that Azor Ahai did it makes more sense. And I think that is what happened. So that's the end of my script. I've got it off my chest. 15,000 words about the timeline. There it is. We are going to hang on for a little bit longer and take a few questions. We're well over the 2-hour mark. I try to keep the live streams under 2 hours, but we've blown past that here. So you definitely take some questions, guys. What did y'all think of my heresy? Not that heretical, really, right? Not too crazy. I mean, I made a pretty good case for it, I think. I think I'm talking sense here. Oh, they're saying nice things. Thanks, guys. And if you want the evidence for Nissa Nissa as a child of the forest, then go to the one called the Weirwood Goddess series. It's only 3 episodes. It's pretty short and concise. And it's all the different Nissa Nissa archetype characters in the story. And I'm showing how they're implied as children of the forest, from Dany to Cersei to Kat to Melisandre to the Wildling Spearwives, Asha and Osha, and all kinds of, a lot of the Moon Maidens are children of the forest, Nissa Nissa analogs. And it's some great symbolism. It really is. The Cersei stuff is amazing. If you've ever asked me for Cersei symbolism, Weirwood Goddess series is the place to find it. Tiger Woman, yes. Tiger Woman could be Catwoman, and that could be a child of the forest because they have the slitted cat eyes and they're nocturnal. Totally. I do think that Tiger Woman might be Nissa Nissa, actually, and that the Bloodstone Emperor didn't marry Tiger Woman after killing the Amethyst Empress Nissa Nissa, but actually Tiger Woman was Nissa Nissa. Alternately, we have the God Empress of Leng, who seems like she could be a good match for a God Emperor of the Great Empire of the Dawn, and Leng is associated with tigers, and also they have the old ones lurking about on Leng, which could be related to the Children of the Forest, because the native Lengi have golden glowing eyes, kind of like the children. So there you go. Arya, yes, she's very much a wild goddess. So remember when Arya's wearing the acorn dress and hanging out at Acorn Hall, and it says she looks like a tree? That's because Nissa Nissa ends up merging with the tree and is, like I said, like a dryad, like a tree woman. All the children of the forest are like that. They take care of the trees just like a typical elf or dryad would. So yeah, I have listened to the Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson stuff. They've done a lot of stuff together, and I'm up on all of it, and I love it. Yes. Of course, not all of Graham Hancock's theories have panned out, but he has been banging on about the idea that the Ice Age could have been caused by a comet, the Little Ice Age, rather, the Younger Dryas. And that seems to be true. So congratulations to him for getting one right. And in case you're not up on that, yes, they are, over the past few years, they are discovering that the Younger Dryas, which was a temporary cold snap around 1200 or 12,000 AD, rather, is probably attributed to a comet that broke up over the northern ice sheet primarily and landed and shattered some glacial lakes and caused all kinds of flooding and messed up the climate and all that kind of fun stuff. So how do you think Azor Ahai managed to forge swords continuously for 100 days and nights? No rest or sleep? Could he be a firewhite like Barrack? Yeah, that's actually a good question. I think probably that's myth. And actually, it's one of the most annoying parts of the Azor Ahai legend is the numbers. It adds up to 180 days. It's 30, 50, and then 100. 180 days is half a year, it seems like, on Planetos, because the months we're told that they're 30 days exactly. And so it seems like we have a 360-day year and 180-day half year. So that could be the meaning, but I don't even know what that means, half a year, what that has to do with anything. So I don't really have a clue about the 100 days and 100 nights things. And in fact, number symbolism is often what stymies me. Like Danny's the child of 3. What does that mean? Well, there's 3 of a million things. So 3 heads has the dragon. What does that mean? Well, a bunch of stuff. It's hard to pin down. Are there 7 characters that perfectly correlate with the gods of the 7? I mean, no, there's more characters that correlate with many of them. So I don't know. That one's tough for me. I'm not sure. If any of you have clues about the 100 days and nights thing, what that means, maybe you could solve one of my oldest perplexing mysteries about Azor Ahai. Oh, here's a good question. I think Euron is aware of all kinds of history because he's been to Ashai and other places. So of all the people that might know about the Great Empire of the Dawn or what the oily black stone Seastone chair is for, can you do magic with the Seastone chair? Euron would know. Yeah, totally. Would he know who the original settlers of the Iron Islands were? Perhaps he's been to Ashai. So, yeah. Euron could be one of those figures that shines a light onto some ancient mysteries. We've also got like Roderick the Reader and Archmaester Marwyn and obviously Bran and a few other people, Melisandre, that could tell us a few things. So like I said, last call for questions. Looks like everyone likes my alternate chronology. I'm not seeing any outrage. This is an outrage. And by the way, Euron is a great example of an evil Azor Ahai character. I'm going to release the Azor Ahai video tomorrow morning about Azor Ahai being the bad guy and how Jon and Dany don't measure up to that. They actually are more like a self-sacrificing Nissa figure. Obviously, Euron would be your willing to kill anyone to gain magical power kind of dude. The rest of the Winds of the Winter video prediction videos do not exist yet. We did have plans for 3 or 4. We do have plans, I should say. We have scripts for some of them. And we actually are thinking about climbing back on that horse here shortly. Quinn's been doing both Dune and also Tadia. If you haven't checked out his Tadia graphic novel Indiegogo campaign, then you definitely should. It is raging since it opened on Sunday. And thanks on behalf of him for everyone who's signed up for that. And so, yes, we had to pause the Winds of Winter. Also, we've been moving. If you want to help me find a new house, paypal.me/mythical astronomy. I'm sorry to keep begging for money, but it is helpful. And so where was I? Yes, we took a break on the Winds of Winter videos, but we will resume them. We're going to do one with Gray area. In fact, going to bring her in on one, and we might do other collaborations too. So yeah, no, I'm into Dune. I've read like the first book a while ago, and I've watched all Quinn's videos on like the main the viewer's guide to Dune. So no, I'm into it. I like the philosophy a lot. I guess I do need to read a couple of the other books, but yeah. So no, I'm not in the new place yet, Tracy. We're still house hunting, so we're posting up in the Airbnb and looking for a place. Yeah, so we've not found our forever home. That's why I don't have my glorious studio full of stuff set up yet, but I will eventually have all that. Yeah, Quinn and I are roommates, and we're out here in California now looking for a spot. If you're in NorCal, hit me up. We can do social distance hangout-ing or whatever. All right, Chris B. Thank you, Chris B. Let's see. 100 days could be a little bit more than one winter, so it could be a period of darkness. Yeah, that's a good guess. Thank you, Alicia. I've learned much and more from you. Thank you, Alicia. Everyone's naming strains. Gelato, Purple Haze. Yeah, gelato is a good one. I go sativas myself. I don't like to fall asleep. Wouldn't it make sense to have an army of Firewhites who need no rest and food to fight against the others? Yeah, so Rocky, that's actually my whole theory on Cold Hands and Jon, is that is why we have whites that are not on Team Others, whether it's a Firewhite like Beric or Jon being a better Firewhite or a cold white like Cold Hands, who fights for Team Living, is that whites don't need to sleep. They don't need warmth. They don't need food. So they're the ideal people to deal with the lands of always winter. That's why Jon has been made into a white. And that is why Cold Hands is ranging the north as a white. And we could have more whites before the story is over. Yes. I actually think the last hero's dozen were whites. So that's my theory, is that when it says the last hero's friends were all killed, all 12 of his companions, where they were killed, but then they were resurrected as the original Night's Watch. As green zombies is the word that I've coined to describe them. Essentially, they are weirwood zombies or skin changer zombies, because the last hero's, you know, he had his dog, so it's probably like a Stark with a wolf, probably a skin changer. And so we see what's going on with Jon is that when he's dead, his spirit is in his wolf ghost, and it's going to reside in his wolf for a short amount of time before it merges with the wolf. And so that's something that Beric doesn't have. So when Jon is resurrected, we might get more of his spirit preserved because he's had his wolf as like a soul jar, and then it'll get put back into the body. So Jon could be basically a better white than Beric or Stoneheart. And that might be what Cold Hands is like a skin changer zombie, because Cold Hands talks to the ravens and he rides the elk. And as I've pointed out, the great elk that he's talking about are 10 feet tall at the shoulder, and the rack of antlers is 10 feet wide. It's a gigantic beast. It's terrifying, and it would not be something that you could ride without magic. Elks aren't tameable. So, you know, Cold Hands is probably using skin changer magic to ride the elk, just like Varamir rides the snow bear. And I think it makes sense also that Jon would retain his skin changer magic when he is resurrected. So that's what I think Cold Hands is an undead skin changer white. And I think that he's foreshadowing for Jon, him and Beric. So basically you take Beric and Cold Hands and put them together. I think that's going to be Jon. And also Elric of Melniboné, because Jon might have white hair and red eyes. And yes, Cold Hands could be a Raven's Teeth, but I think he's older. I think he's one of the last hero's companions. Yeah, Princess Mononoke's got some cool looking stuff in it. Sure does. I haven't seen it, but I've seen some of the clips. And the green zombies may have been created on the Isle of Faces in the aftermath of the original slaughter of green men. They may have even been the green men that were slaughtered. The green zombies are intimately connected with the others. They are the anti-other force. The Night's Watch itself is originally green zombies. That's why they wear black. They're supposed to be thought of as dead and undead. That's why they take no wives and stay at their post forever, because they originally are supposed to be undead. There's the ideal people to fight the others, like I was saying. And so, yes, I believe that they could have been created at the Isle of Faces. That could have been part of what's remembered as the trees being given faces and all that stuff. So, all right. Yes, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. No, you don't want an Irish elk. Not anywhere near you. There's a cool video going around social media of people walking by a moose. There's a moose walking in the median of the highway. And some of the moose that they have up there are the same size as the elk that I'm talking about. You know, 10 feet tall at the shoulder, 10-foot wide rack of antlers. And you can see the cars passing on either side of this moose walking down the median. And it's just like, oh, wow, okay, that's big. And those people are way too close. Like, if a moose gets angry, it's an ugly story. And elk are even more rowdy. So, yeah, a great elk is nothing you want to be near. And in fact, I have a great elk picture that I will put up on the screen. Like I said, last call for questions, super chats, anything like that. Which Cold Hands picture shall I use? Let's see. Which one best captures the size? Yeah, maybe this one. There you go. You can see it's a little bit cartoonish, but still, I mean, it's big enough to ride on. And that's absolutely the idea. Let's see, here's another one. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Oh, that first one, by the way, was by Akazagot, and this one is by Zippo514. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite cold hands ones. And you can see, like, yeah, it's huge. So there you go. There you go. Somebody's piping in that Teddy Roosevelt didn't call his party the Bull Moose Party for nothing. Thanks, Carl Karsnark. Yes. Great elks are metal as fuck. People do ride reindeer in real life. Well, I think reindeer are a little calmer than elks, but yeah, maybe my knowledge is not 100%. I don't know. I've not heard of elks being tamed. Reindeer, yeah, maybe you got some Eskimos up there doing that. Is that what you're talking about, Smitty? An indigenous practice, yeah. Okay. Look up a picture of someone riding a reindeer in real life, bro, someone says. Let's do it. Person riding reindeer. This is, I still think Cold Hands is a skin changer. But let's see here. He also talks to the ravens, don't forget. Oh yes, we've definitely got things here. So let me share this window. We're doing research together. Person riding reindeer. All right. So I'll zoom in on some of these here. So here's one. Oh, never mind. Let's open image in new tab. There we go. Yeah, so that person might be a skin changer, don't you think? No, I'm kidding. That's not a skin changer. This is a native person. Let's see if I can find out from where. Reindeer riders. The link itself isn't working. Oh, here it is. Cool, cool. I hate to just say a native. That sounds stupid. Nomads of Outer Mongolia. Oh, no. I'm sorry. This is just a cleverly worded intro. Yes. Okay. This is from Mongolia. Correct. It is. Okay. Well, it's loading very slow. Sorry, guys. I'm working on limited connection, but let's go back to the pictures. Yeah. So these reindeer are smaller. These are not like quite Cold Hands elks. And look, their antlers are fuzzy and soft. The great elk skeleton, the antlers are much more terrifying. But look, even little kids can ride the reindeer. The reindeer are so friendly. They're like chill. Look at this. Yeah, great elks are not chill, guys. So the reason why elks are symbolic of male virility and all the Garth Cernuno stuff is tied to elks is because elks are wild and untamable. Like that's their whole thing. Yeah, the Irish elk were absolutely huge. And let's see. Nordic people of Lapland ride reindeer. Cool, cool. So yeah, let me pull up some Irish elk for you so you can see that while I've got the window up. These things are truly terrifying. There's just this skeleton. So there's, okay, so here's the scale. No. That's really small. But you can see the dude, like, they're taller than men. And there's like a regular elk. And this is the great elk. That is a cool one. Open image in new tab. As you can see, somebody found this one in their yard. There's a picture of the person crouching near it somewhere. Oh, here it is. Yeah, see, this guy found that. This is a smaller one even, but you can see, like, there's a better picture. I don't know why these are loading so small. Anyways, I just stick with this page. So this is that's a recreation of one from a museum. So this is an adult person right here. And you can see like it is 10 feet tall at the shoulder. Look at that. I mean, this is probably the picture that really gets it the best. Think about someone riding that. There. Look at that. Look at that. That's what Cold Hands was riding. That's cool. I'm sorry, but that is cool. That is cool. And they look like dragon wings, the antlers too, as I've described. I mean, that's just something else. I'm at a loss for words with Irish elk. It's definitely just, let's see if I can find one with a skeleton. There's a good skeleton from movies. Oh, here's a good picture. And it's a big one too. I'm being exposed for too many tabs that I have. Oh, it said it was big. That wasn't big. The biggest deer that ever lived. And Cold Hands elk is not dead. It dies at a certain point. So it is not undead before that. It is, oh, this blog has been removed. Wow. Why won't you open this image bigger? What's up with that? There we go. There we go. Cool. Where can I go to take a picture like that? That's awesome. That is very cool. Let's save this. Downloads. Irish elk. Behind me. So, weirwoods. Oh, I see a good question. Yeah, I think the weirwoods are not trees. I think they are a fungal entity. I think they're all connected underground. I think the trees are like the mushroom caps that pop up from the organism. That's why we don't have weirwood seeds. And that's why Jojen paste is people. It's one of the reasons anyway. Okay, stop sharing screen. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Like I said, last call. If you have any more questions you want me to get, tag me and I will grab them. But yeah, there's my timeline. I think I've settled it. There you go. I feel very satisfied having rewritten the histories. Yes. All right. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for everyone who sent in. Let me just check my email again. Oh, yes, I've got more. Thank you, guys. Catherine Halverson. Thank you. Andrew Wilson. Thank you. Guys are the best. All right. So like I said, I have a new video out tomorrow morning about Azor High. So I will, now that I've got internet access back, I'll be streaming a lot the second half of the month. And oh, Brett Colmer, super chat. Where was it? I missed it. But if you, yeah, it's not in my list. Brett, just repeat your question, buddy, and I will say thank you and I will answer it. T-shirts not available yet. It's something I need to do probably after I moved and settled. I'll get the new Mythical Astronomy logo, that orange one with the Sri Yantra. Definitely get some of those going. Thanks, Helen. And Brett, I'm looking for your question, buddy. Just waiting for it. One more song. Well, I can't do any background music because then I lose the monetization. So I gave you my Andals time after time. I think that's what I got for today. Brett's question. Who did Bloodraven eat to wed himself to the trees? Probably one of Bloodraven's unfortunate raven's teeth. They looked around. They were like, wait, oh, isn't he from the Cranogs? There was some, it's like Jojen's great uncle or something, probably. But that is a good question. Has there always been a human green seer? Is there a direct transmission from one to the next? Was there one before Bloodraven? I would love to get an answer to that. We can only guess. There's no evidence really to tell us about a previous three-eyed crow or what called Bloodraven there, or if Bloodraven was reached out to by somebody. It seems likely, but we don't know. I'd love to find out. No, Bloodraven didn't eat Sheriff Seastar. Sheriff Seastar might be like Quaithe or something, or like yeah, or maybe that's Alyssa Farman. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Bloodraven would eat Cher at Seastar. He's still hung up on Cher, so I don't think so. But thanks for saying something totally awful. Maybe the children of the forest keep humans as cattle to ensure supply. Well, I do think that that's the reason why they need human green seers, is because they might be short on like actual children of the forest green seers. So that might be the reason. All right, guys. Well, there you go. I think that will just about do it. And thank you all for coming. So I will see you tomorrow with a new video. And you all have been a lovely audience. Thanks for everyone who sent in super chats and donations. And I'll see you next time.